Number 5. The Pearls of Death. We know the Warrens. If that name doesn't sound familiar, check out some of the other vids on who they were on this channel. They were a pretty spooky duo. They've seen some nightmarish stuff in their time, and still have some proof of the evil that they vanquished. Their son-in-law still runs the official occult museum website and museum out of Monroe, Connecticut. Now, if you've seen Annabelle Comes Home, this first item on the list should ring a bell. The character Daniela in the movie tries to communicate to a loved one beyond the grave. Never a good idea. Unless you're with the Long Island medium, you know? Stick with the professionals. In order to do that, however, she puts on the museum's mourning bracelet. Yeah, that's not really a good idea there, Daniela. Now, there isn't really a mourning bracelet in the real occult museum, but there is such a thing as the Pearls of Death. And as of now, the Pearls of Death still have yet to appear in the Conjuring franchise. But they're notoriously one of the most dangerous items in the Warrens Museum, says their son-in-law, and very, very real. Beautiful accessory, I should add, but a very haunted and spirited set of pearls. They were added to the museum after a woman claimed that they were constantly strangling her. The Pearls of Death are said to strangle those who wear them. Now, I know what you're thinking. Get a bigger size, right? Well, it wasn't the wrong fit, per se, but like, choked aggressively. The story goes, the second that this poor woman put on these pearls, she literally needed people around her to even yank the pearls from its death grip around her neck. Yo, that is terrifying. Sometimes when I sleep with my chain on, I feel like I'm in a triangle choke in the UFC. But thankfully for us, the curls currently rest on the Warren shelves, where they'll hopefully stay for the foreseeable future. Tony Spera, the son-in-law of the Warrens and current owner-operator, says, it all goes way back with the cursed objects. Objects that someone put a curse onto. It could be a bracelet, a necklace, or any article that someone performed incantations and rituals over to put bad energy into, as someone or something famously did to the Annabelle doll. I feel like just talking about it, she's gonna show up. In the same way a priest can bless a holy relic, a satanic worshiper or black magic practitioner can curse a belonging, as seen with the Pearls of Death. Number 4, the werewolf paw. As always, if you dig what we do here on Top 5 Scary, hit that like button or feel free to leave us a comment down below. Let us know which James Wan Warren story is your favorite. I mean, nothing beats the David's exorcism scene in The Conjuring 3. Yeah, spoiler alert, it's uncomfortable to watch. Some of you will get it. Scariest thing I've ever seen in my life, I swear to God. However, in Annabelle Comes Home, we see another terrifying object just chilling on the shelf. A werewolf claw. Later in the movie, we even see a real werewolf demon thing outside the Warrens' house. And of course, according to Tony Spera, the werewolf paw is a nod to the real 1980s werewolf case that took the Warrens all the way to London, England. A true story of demonic possession, and not just normal demonic possession. That's a weird sentence to say out loud. But we know about this case. Apparently, they watched a television program, Sightings, and police officers and locals got interviewed about their encounters with a real local werewolf, the infamous Bill Ramsay. They said his abilities to take on men twice his size with ease as he would rampage through the city, blacking out. Lorraine felt a connection to him, and after traveling to London, she found Bill. According to Lorraine, he was possessed by an evil wolf spirit and needed a full-blown exorcism. The exorcism was a success on American soil, and Bill was able to return home, ready to start the rest of his non-lycanthropic days. He wouldn't grow hair or change at a full moon, but he used his fingers like claws, attacked people, and even would run around on all fours. Could this wolf paw in the museum be responsible for the werewolf case in London? I think it might.
Number 3, an exorcism. To some, the ultimate paranormal dream would be getting to ride shotgun with the Warrens on one of their cases, getting to experience the paranormal firsthand under the tutelage of those who have battled it their whole lives. It would be like if Obi-Wan Kenobi picked you up on some backwater desert planet and asked if you wanted to go on a great adventure with him. It would be awesome. Well, some people get to live their dreams every day. Like me, you know, my dream was to stand in front of a camera and talk about ghosts all day long. A YouTuber by the name of Haley Reese got the rare opportunity to meet Tony Spera, the husband of Judy Warren, daughter of the family, and Lorraine Warren a bit before she passed away, and she got a blessed look into some never before seen footage of the pair of demonologists conducting some field work, namely an exorcism. Now the person being exorcised, their name is Roberto, but they've been blurred out to protect their safety. Demon possession is one thing, but doxing is a whole other. We see Lorraine and Tony both fiercely conducting an exorcism, locked in a spiritual battle against the forces inside. We hear Tony asking for the demon's name repeatedly, not just because he's a friendly guy, he seems like he's pretty friendly, but because to properly drive a demon out of a host, you need to know its name. Well, just listen to what he answers with, it's gonna shock you. Beelzebub. Now there's a bit of discrepancy whether or not Beelzebub and the devil are considered different entities. Depending on the text you're reading or the mythology, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Either way, it's bad news. It's not something you would like to invite inside you. The worst part is if you're listening, apparently that's not even the only demon inside. It was like a clown car of demonic energy inside one guy. Now, thankfully, after a tough battle, they were able to get all the demons outside of him and hopefully banish them all away. Do you think it leaves like a weird taste in your mouth after you've had demonic possession? Like, you know, when you wake up, like after having a nap and your mouth just feels weird? I feel like I need to brush my teeth a few times at least afterwards. Number 2, Annabelle on tour. Annabelle is the #1 name in cursed dolls. Sorry Megan, we love you, but Annabelle's got staying power and she's just been here longer. More movies too, although on a side note, I'm hoping they make more Megan movies. As such, Annabelle has become quite popular, with a lot of demand for the cursed toy, despite the fact that, you know, she's got a demon inside of her and is apparently very evil, and she should be kept under proper lock and key. Did you know that there was a significant enough demand for Annabelle that she tours? Yeah, you heard me right. Annabelle tours. And you know what? I think that's great. Girl, get it. You gotta get that bag, you know? The movies made you a star, really propelled you to the world stage. It would be a shame to keep you locked up in Connecticut when your fans are waiting. A recent clip made the rounds on TikTok of a paranormal investigator, Eric Vital, transporting the allegedly haunted doll to take her to Perron, a convention for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts to break bread, swap stories, and pick up cursed goods. Founded in the Warrens' memory to carry on their legacy and establish a community of ghost hunters. Eric is part of the New England Society for Paranormal Research, the foundation created by Ed and Lorraine to further the development and research of the paranormal. Now, this short video of him unpacking Annabelle got all kinds of attention on TikTok, mostly from people wondering why you would want to take her anywhere, or why you would want to get your hands on her at all. I mean, inside the case she's carried in literally says, "Do not open under any circumstances." Now, Eric did understand this, and he assured that those who are worried that they take all the proper precautions, and that's not just putting Annabelle in a seatbelt. "We take this very seriously," he said. "Our faith is very strong, all of us. So we bless the van. We all have enormous amounts of holy water. We have a priest come in, bless the area, and bless the items. And maybe put her in a car seat too, just to be safe." And number 1, Buddhist exorcism. You know, it wasn't just the United States where Ed and Lorraine worked on their cases. If there was a call for it, the Warrens would do their best to answer. Plus, I feel like if you only ghost hunt in one country, you're missing out on so many good demons and scares. If you're a fan of the channel, then you know by now just how many really fascinating cultural and regional monsters that exist out there and all the different ghost stories that exist. You know, you can spend your whole life battling demons, but have you ever gone toe to toe with a yokai or an oni? Maybe that's why the Warrens decided to take a trip to Japan in the early 2000s. Maybe they just wanted a nice vacation, or maybe they were getting tired of local poltergeists and wanted a new difficult challenge. They set out to Japan to investigate these allegedly haunted tunnels, where a number of people were reported to have died in. Ed was a former World War II Navy veteran, and he had spent a lot of time around Japan and was interested in their culture and the reports and things that he had heard. Of course, it was hardly a vacation, because while they were there, they were asked to participate in a Buddhist exorcism of a young woman named Teresa who had become the unwilling host to a litany of demons. They were aided by a group of Buddhists during their exorcism, a change of pace from their usual help from ordained Catholic ministers. We'll play it for you now so you can get some eyes on it. In the clip, we can hear Lorraine doing her level best to try and cast the evil out of the young girl's body. Now, the clip's a bit hard to watch, I'm gonna be honest. Seeing somebody writhe around screaming in what looks like agony, but luckily, they're being tended to by the experts, I guess. If there was anyone you'd want, it would probably be Ed and Lorraine and a group of Buddhists. Ed and Lorraine said the Buddhists were extremely helpful, saying they were cut from a different cloth. And if they're ever running out of Conjuring movies or running out of ideas for them, I think they should start sending the Warrens internationally. Or just stop pretending they're based on true stories altogether. Have the Warrens try to fight Godzilla, or have them fight the Predator or something. Let's see them exercise their way out of that one. Let's see holy water and a little rosary take on the Predator.
In 5th place, their origins in the profession. Honestly, before today, I never really dug too much into the personal lives of Ed and Lorraine Warren, preferring to focus my interest on their professional work, and only really knowing about their daughter Judy from the rare time they mentioned her in one of their books, and her husband because of all the rare footage he's publicized since Ed and Lorraine's death. Outside of the Hollywood romanticizing, which I promise I'll touch on eventually, how did Ed and Lorraine actually fall into this line of work? So Lorraine was 9 when she first saw auras. She thought everyone saw them, but found out quickly otherwise when she brought it up at her Catholic school, when she compared the lights surrounding the Mother Superior and Sister Joseph, and was told immediately to never talk of what she saw ever again, learning to, hide her gifts or joke it off. Ed, on the other hand, grew up in a haunted house. He'd look into closets and see faces, one specifically of an old lady. The temperature in his room would drop and he would hear footsteps and heavy breathing. When he brought it up to his father, he was told that, there's a logical explanation for everything, and just leave it at that. So they both did their very best to try and ignore their gifts, wanting to live normal lives, but the universe threw them together and had different plans. Ed had a near-death experience while serving in the Navy during World War II, when the ship he was on collided with an oil tanker in the North Atlantic. A fire erupted and all of the men on the ship had to jump overboard. As Ed was in the icy water, he prayed for help and was soon rescued, believing it to be from cosmic interference. So after that experience, he returned home and asked Lorraine to marry him, and they got married almost immediately. After the war, Ed took up a profession as a fine arts painter, with the duo traveling from fair to fair to sell their wares, and eventually this became helpful during the beginnings of their work. They would research houses they believed to be haunted, and then, go to that house. After Ed would paint the domicile, he would hand the painting to Lorraine, who would knock on the door and offer the homeowners the painting as, their ticket into the house. Once she struck up a conversation with the homeowner, they would learn more about the property and hauntings, if there were hauntings, that is. At one house, which already had, some local notoriety as a supernatural hotspot, Lorraine went into spontaneous trance and claimed that this is where she learned not to fear death. I thought there was more to that. In 4th place, we have the White Lady hoax. Just so we all have the same context going into this, the White Lady is the name of the ghost that haunts the Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. So most locals believe her to be the ghost of Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, with Harriet herself passing soon after. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son, and still wanders their final resting place searching him out. Other folks believe the White Lady is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who killed her husband and later herself and is, doomed to wander the graveyard. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. So me if I was wearing white, which will never happen here. I promise you that. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, which, once again, my kind of gal. Many who have witnessed her believe that they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over. Others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. Now, Ed Warren was obsessed with her and has gone on record as being, determined to capture footage of her on film. Once he was able to do so, he kept the tape for himself. Yeah, he hoarded that tape like it held the secrets to the universe, or, like he was the US government with all the proof they have of alien life. He allowed a select few people to view it while, it was being held in his personal archives, and none were ever allowed to further analyze it on their own time. I'm raising an eyebrow right now in suspicion. And once again, if I had a red flag, I'd be waving it right here. So since the passing of both Ed and Lorraine, their son-in-law, Tony Spera, has released the footage in its entirety to YouTube. The tape shows an apparent white human figure moving behind some tombstones. Similar to videos of UFOs, Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, the figure is at that perfect distance and resolution so a shape can be seen, but we don't have any details that could lead to a definitive identification. A woman named Judith Penny, who I will discuss in more detail later, has said she helped Ed maintain his reputation as a ghost hunter. So what does that mean? So when he claimed to have captured the White Lady on tape in the summer of 1990, after camping out in the graveyard for a week, allegedly, Judith was the mystical being spotted on tape, masking herself with a white sheet.
Number 3, driveway alien. Ed and Lorraine Warren got involved in all sorts of things. It's said that they've tussled with vampires, with werewolves. Now, we don't have it on 100% authority that they ever encountered aliens, but they definitely could have. They researched everything. So let's take a look at this weird video of what looks to be a visitor from another world touching down on the driveway. You wouldn't expect aliens to make first contact in Colorado, but hey, here we are. In this video, we can see a really scrawny little creature walking up and down Vivian Gomez's driveway. The creature had people talking because, well, take a look at it. Just what is it? It almost looks like it's got giant ears flopping around when it moves, and I'm not gonna lie to you, it reminds me a lot of Dobby from Harry Potter, so maybe he just got a sock and he's just celebrating his happiness and he's excited to be free. The woman whose driveway caught the security footage, one Vivian Gomez, had this to offer when she posted it on Facebook. So I woke up on Sunday Sunday morning and saw this on my camera, and I'm trying to figure out what the heck. First, I saw the shadow walking from my front door, then I saw this thing. Has anyone else seen this on their cameras? The other two cameras didn't pick it up for some reason. Sadly, her security camera only films for about 10 seconds or so this is the only footage that she was able to capture of this mysterious driveway creature. Gomez clarified for everyone that whatever it was wasn't her son. Okay, we weren't thinking that, but now we're definitely not thinking that, because she doesn't let him out by himself that late, although that opens up a lot of questions. She saw something strange running around her driveway at night and considered the possibility that that might be her son. Like I said, I'm pretty sure the most likely possibility is that this is a freed house elf excited for the future, or a very confused alien. Could be an alien that just touched down. Maybe a Terminator traveling through time. That's why it looked naked. Gang, you let me know what you think what this mystery monster could have been down below. Number 2, Jharkhand. Coming up next is a clip out of India that went viral last year and captured the attention of paranormal enthusiasts, alien hunters, and skeptics alike. I like when you can get everybody all in together and like that. You see something weird on camera, we're like, is this an alien? Is this a ghost? Is this a demon? I'm not sure, but let's all take a look at it. A strange humanoid-like figure was spotted walking across the road in India, confusing everybody. Whatever it was filmed walking alone steadily on a bridge at night in Jharkhand in eastern India, staggering around through the night. Now the thing looks human, and my brain initially is like, yeah, that's a human. But the more you look at it, the more you start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this might have crawled out of something. This creature is gangly, and it has these long arms and long pale white skin and very skinny, and it looks like something out of Silent Hill. Motorcyclists were swerving out of the way of this figure, which stops and stares at them for a bit before continuing to stroll onwards. Now naturally, this got people talking, because it's not every day you see a terrifying pale figure like that. More than a few people suggested that it could be an alien walking around the streets at night, explaining why it seems so confused. Others suggested that it could be a ghost, which would be pretty spooky. I would say it does seem like it's physically present. It seems like it's physically on the road, so I'm not 100% that it's a ghost. And finally, there's the realists, who have suggested that this could just be someone who had a long night and is lost and on all the substances right now, just trying to get a good night's sleep. As far as I know, no one has cracked this case, certainly not Ed and Lorraine Warren, so we may never have a satisfying answer. And number 1, the Buddhist exorcism. It wasn't just the United States where Ed and Lorraine Warren worked on their cases. If there was a call for it, the Warrens would do their best to answer. Plus, I don't know, I feel like if you only hunt ghosts in one country, then you're missing out on just so many good demons and ghosts out there. If you're a fan of the channel, and I hope you are, then you know by now just how many amazing, interesting regional monsters, myths, and cryptids there are all over the world. You can spend your whole life battling demons, but have you ever gone toe-to-toe with an Oni or a yokai, something like that? Well, maybe that's why the Warrens decided to take a trip out to Japan in the early 2000s. Maybe they wanted a vacation and a change of pace, or maybe they were looking to challenge themselves. They set out to Japan to investigate these allegedly haunted tunnels, where a number of people were reported to have died in. Ed was a World War II Navy veteran and had spent a lot of time around Japan and was fascinated in their culture and the things that he had seen while stationed there. Of course, hardly a vacation, because while they were there, they were asked to participate in a Buddhist exorcism of a young woman named Teresa who'd become the unwilling host to a litany of demons. They were aided by a group of Buddhists during the exorcism, which is probably a change of pace from their usual ordained Catholic ministers. In the clip, we can hear Lorraine doing her level best to try and cast the evil out of the young girl's body. The clip is a bit hard to watch, and that's coming from someone who watches ghost videos literally every single day of his life. You're watching someone writhe around screaming in what looks like agony. But hey, luckily they were being tended to by the experts. Ed and Lorraine Warren spoke very highly of the Buddhist monks helping them as well, saying they were cut from a different cloth. I'm not sure if that's a pun or not. I feel too, if they ever start running out of ideas for the Conjuring movies, they should definitely start sending the Warrens international. Conjuring in Japan, I already feel like that's a good premise for a movie. Or maybe, and bear with me here, the Conjuring movies should get way more wild. We already know they're only based on true stories, they're not real stories, so just have them fighting Godzilla or whatever. I would love to see Ed and Lorraine Warren try and exorcise Godzilla. You let me know who you'd love to see Ed and Lorraine go toe to toe against. I'd want to see what they could do with Freddy Krueger too, personally. Number 5, Annabelle. Well, it just would not be the Warrens without Annabelle. She's easily the most famous thing in their collection, and let's be real, she's probably one of the most famous dolls on the planet. You know, Barbie, Annabelle. Do you ever wonder if they ever thank her for all the good publicity she's given them? By now, I'm sure if you're watching this video, you know the story of Annabelle, the haunted doll that they kept captive, but I'll run it by you again in case you don't. It was given to a nursing student as a gift from her mother, and within days, things started getting scary. Notes would appear around the house scrawled in red liquid that read out terrifying messages like, "Help me." Allegedly lunged at the girl's boyfriend one night, and well, after a doll comes alive and lunges at you, you call some help, and then Ed and Lorraine were called in to exorcise the demon inside Annabelle. In the end, they keep her locked up very tight, surrounded by rosaries and holy water to ensure the demon inside can't harm anyone anymore, and they keep her locked up except when they wheel her out for publicity events and take her to conventions. While Annabelle has enjoyed quite the career as a movie star, the real Annabelle is locked away to keep the evil dormant. In this footage, we're treated to some up close and personal glamour shots of Annabelle in the flesh, or stuffing, I guess, locked tight in her cage. The footage comes from Tony Spera, the son-in-law of Ed and Lorraine Warren, who's gonna get mentioned a whole heck of a lot in this video. He takes us on a brief tour of the museum, getting a real up close to it. Even through a YouTube screen, you can feel some evil radiating off this doll. Now sadly, if you're a big Warren superfan and you want to go check out the museum, unfortunately it's closed right now, but they are hoping to reopen it. So one day Annabelle can get back to scaring her fans in person like she always has. When I said before that they take her out to conventions, that wasn't just me being snarky, it's real. She just recently was at the Warrens Perron, the convention dedicated to supernatural hunters of the paranormal. You can line up, take a photo with Annabelle. I'm not sure if I'd take a selfie with her though. I don't know. It might look good on a Tinder profile, maybe? I'm not sure. And if you're looking for way more Ed and Lorraine content, true tales of terror, fake fibs of frauds, cryptids, ghosts, ghouls, goblins, aliens, pretty much anything scary under the sun and above it, well, you already know Top 5 Scary is the place for that. Make sure you stay subscribed. Please ring that little bell to the side so you get all of our videos when they upload. But do that at the end of this video, okay? Because I got 4 more pieces of Ed and Lorraine footage coming up for you right now, baby. Number 4, the museum tour. Now, if you wanted to go to the world's foremost collection of haunted relics and cursed objects, there's probably no storeroom full of curses more than the legendary collection of the Warrens' Haunted Museum of Souvenirs. Now, like I said just a second ago, the museum is currently closed as of the writing of this video, but they are trying to reopen soon. You know, cross your fingers. But in the meantime, you can take a digital tour, as this footage posted by the Warren's son-in-law, Tony Spera, shows Mr. Warren giving a guided tour of some of the more unique haunted artifacts resting in the Connecticut garage. Now the full video, definitely worth a watch if you're a big fan of the Warrens, since it's as close as you'll be able to get to walking around the museum these days. It's a full half-hour long of old Ed going into grand detail and recounting some stories about some of their more notable and famous cases. Shoutouts include the witch Hannah Cranna, an old Connecticut legend, or the Conjuring mirror, which might sound like it has something to do with the movie, but very confusingly refers to a case where someone used this mirror in a ritual to try and summon a demon, a different demon. Ed talks briefly on some of their many cursed dolls and toys, such as a dinosaur from the Devil Made Me Do It case and film, and of course, no visit to the Warrens Museum would exclude Annabelle. She's the star attraction of the place, probably what keeps the lights on for so long. She's shown under a tight lock and key, and Ed goes over the history of how they brought her in, and he touches briefly on the containment protocol for her, how she has to always be locked up in a storage box behind glass, surrounded by rosary beads and doused in holy water, in an effort to keep the vile spirits tucked away. A small question: if a spirit is so powerful and malevolent that it's got this unspeakable ancient evil that attacks humans, wouldn't it be stronger than a pane of glass? Wouldn't it be stronger than a thin little thing of glass? I guess it's a doll, but I didn't think the solution to ultimate evil was to just put like a fence around it. That's what you do when like a dog is getting into stuff that you don't want them to get into. You just fence them out a bit in the backyard. Dogs, haunted dolls. Okay.
Coming in at number 3, they didn't plan to leave. Everyone knows that the Lutz family lived in the house for less than a month, but did you know that on the morning they left for the last time, they had always planned to return? They did not know that they were saying goodbye to their home and belongings forever. George Lutz said in one of his final interviews, I quote, "We didn't get up to leave that morning. You need to understand that. This was our house. We lived there." After a night that particularly frightened 2 of the children, the Lutz had said they had called a priest they had been in contact with throughout the ordeal, who encouraged them to go somewhere else the following night. They had, at that point, not slept through the night for weeks and thought it would be best to stay with family so everyone could rest. Instead, they ended up packing their bags from Kathy's mother's house, leaving the rest of their belongings in the house and boarding a plane for San Diego. Their belongings ended up later being sold at auction. They did not want to leave their home, but they were told that they had to. Once Ed and Lorraine were told about the events and were brought in to uncover the truth, they warned them that they could never return to the home for the sake of their family's safety. Apparently, if they had stayed much longer, their fate could have been the same as the DeFeos. The same spirits still plagued the house, and they might not have been able to fight them much longer with them struggling to sleep, eat, and function to the best of their ability. Coming in at number 2, the DeFeos were all found in the same position. Although there are some who don't believe Ronald DeFeo Jr. was possessed, there are a number of things about that night that don't make any logical sense without the possible hauntings being involved. The first thing that seems like a satanic ritual is that every family member was found in the exact same position. The whole thing only lasted for around 15 minutes. So would Ronald DeFeo Jr. have had time to stage the bodies in the same position on each of their beds? Maybe, or maybe not. This was something that the spirits within the house did once the act had been done. The police also determined that the rifle hadn't been fitted with a silencer, meaning that after one shot had gone off, the other members of the family should have been alerted to the attack. However, there was no sign of a struggle, nor was there any evidence that sedatives had been used to knock the victims out or keep them quiet. All of which is incredibly weird. So why did no one hear the shots? It seems there is no explanation for this. The only reason anyone was alerted to what happened was the family dog. He alerted the neighbors who called the police. Whether you believe in the paranormal or not, the details of this case are undoubtedly strange. Ed and Lorraine believed there was a great evil within the home. They said they had never been so scared by a case. They commented on how powerful the spirits within the house were. They even followed them home after their investigation. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have second killer. There might have been a second killer who was never caught, but there might not have been. At this time, police and investigators considered the fact that more than one person may have been responsible for the attacks. It was the only way they could make sense of some of the more puzzling aspects of the crime scene. The existence of a second culprit has never been proven, although a documentary filmmaker claimed in 2012 that he had found new evidence supporting the theory. Katzenbach is working on his 3rd documentary about the murders. He insists that he has the documents and the evidence to prove that there was more than one person responsible for the murders. How could a person walk through a 3-story Dutch colonial and shoot 6 different victims on 2 separate levels and no one get out of bed? No one put up a struggle, said Katzenbach. Other details about the case taken together add up to a second gun and a second shooter. Evidence like a photograph of a pillowcase found in a trash can next to the canal, along with a gun found at the bottom of the canal. The police were not convinced that there was enough evidence since Ronald DeFeo Jr. confessed to the case. It was a simple open and shut case and he was convicted. However, he did say the voices told him to do it. Could it be possible that he did have help, that the evidence isn't there for the police as the help was from an entity rather than a person? The entity would not have left fingerprints or evidence of any kind, but the simple fact that things have never added up make it extremely likely. Ed and Lorraine's findings within the house would also support this. They noted that there were a number of violent, powerful entities within the home, powerful enough to attach themselves to Ronald DeFeo Jr. and help him with his crimes.
Number 5. Amityville. It's hard to say outright what the most famous Warren case would be. Annabelle, maybe? The Perron family that would inspire the Conjuring? If we're going solely on the amount of movies made based on one case, then it absolutely has to be the Amityville haunting. Amityville, Long Island was the center stage for one of America's most infamous and strange cases. In 1974, the house had been owned by the DeFeo family, until one day Ronald DeFeo Jr. went one by one with a rifle and ended the life of every member of his family, claiming that spirits and voices from beyond had told him to do it. Not even a year later, the Lutz family would move in, not particularly bothered by the house's dark history. I guess they were getting a great deal. During the first month of living there, they realized almost right away that something was wrong. Swarms of flies appearing everywhere, banging noises, and even seeing spectral apparitions of monstrous animals or phantasmal beings, you know, usual stuff when you move into a fixer-upper. The experts in the paranormal, Ed and Lorraine Warren, were called in to investigate the haunting to see if there was anything they could do. They brought with them camera crews and tried to record their findings, most famously finding a photo of what appeared to be the ghost of a young boy, replete with shimmering eyes staring down from the stairwell. It's actually pretty chilling. Now, it should be addressed that even by skeptic standards, there is a lot of debate as to whether the Amityville horror was closer to the Amityville hoax. George Lutz, the patriarch of the Lutz family, contacted the DeFeo's lawyer, William Weber, who said he was trying to get a book written up about the client, and Weber had later told news media that the haunting was all just a grand exaggeration that he had collaboratively made up with the Lutz family over a bottle of wine, in the hopes of getting a retrial and in the hopes of getting a bit of commercial success for the Lutz family. So I ask you, what do you think? Real example of America's most famous haunting, or just a scary story to sell some books and make some movies? And my ghouls and goblins, if you're looking for more terrifying true tales, or maybe true tales, from ghosts to cryptids to aliens and way more, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then like 10,000 videos on top of that. Drop a like, a subscribe if you'd like, and if you want to stay scared, you know where to go. Alright, moving on. Number 4, Enfield. Another very famous chapter from the Warrens' playbook was the Enfield poltergeist. While not quite as legendary as their other cases, it was still compelling enough to serve as the inspiration for the second Conjuring film. Now, this movie took a few liberties here and there, but for the most part was fairly inspired by the real case. So let's take a little look over as to what truly happened in Enfield all those years ago. It was 6 years after the Perron family haunting, all the way up in Enfield, England. The Hodgson family had been living there peacefully, one single mother, Peggy Hodgson, and her 4 children. It was the summer of 1977, when the youngest members of the Hodgson family seemed to be being targeted by some invisible presence. They saw the dresser of their bedroom sliding across the room as if a powerful force was pushing it all around. They would hear constant knocking from all over. The family had called the police, worried that there might have been a burglar, and when officers arrived, they claimed they arrived to a home where the furniture was free floating throughout the air. Over the course of a year, psychics, investigators, amateur and otherwise, all came to the Enfield house in the hopes that they would be the one to be able to crack this case and figure out just what was causing these mysterious occurrences. Of course, among them was Ed and Lorraine Warren. You probably could have guessed that's why I'm talking about it in the video. They were certain that they had on their hands another classic poltergeist scenario. Now, unlike the film, the story actually does differ pretty greatly here. In the real story, the Warrens were not terribly involved with the Enfield haunting at all. In fact, and were barely there for a few days even. There's even some reports that they were there strictly for media attention, saying to another investigator that we can make some real money off this case. Most of the investigators called believed that the case had been a hoax, and largely exaggerated and stretched by people involved. And the Warrens thought they had a pretty good case on their hands. But was that because there was a real spirit? Or is it just because they knew they had a great plot outline for a possible movie sequel in their franchise someday? In 1979, the Enfield haunting kind of just up and stopped abruptly. No more sightings, no more reports, and no one was ever really sure what had happened. Was it ever really there?
Number 3, Bill Ramsay. Okay, so these Warrens have covered it all. Ghosts, demons, succubuses, even vampires. I'd love to see a good vampire movie, you know? Just Juan takes it into his universe. I'd love to see it. But werewolves? Like, for real? No way. In the 80s, they were fascinated with this werewolf legend, so Lorraine and Ed Warren traveled across the world in search of a real-life wolf man. They watched a television program, Sightings, in which police officer and locals got interviewed about their encounters with a local werewolf, Bill Ramsay, in London, England. Bill himself was questioned about his abilities to take on men twice his size with ease, as he would rampage through the city, blacking out. Lorraine felt a strange connection to him after this, and after a short trip to London, she found Bill Ramsay's whereabouts. Through British police departments, Lorraine made contact. Lorraine and Ed discovered that unlike most werewolf folklore, he does not change physically every moon, or it wasn't a bite that originally caused him to transform. Bill Ramsay, according to Lorraine, was possessed by an evil wolf spirit. and needed help with a full-blown exorcism. The Warrens brought Bill back to Connecticut to meet Bishop Robert McKenna of Our Lady of the Rosary Catholic Church, and he agreed to perform an exorcism for Bill. The exorcism was a success, and thanks to everyone, today Bill lives a pretty normal life. I'd hope so. This is terrifying. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, if that came to theaters, it would probably slap and horrify at the same time. Good problems, you know? Number 2, Japan tour. In the mid-1990s, Ed and Lorraine found themselves overseas in Japan, visiting Nagoya and Tokyo with a team of translators for a small tour of where Ed was stationed in World War II. And of course, some hauntingly terrifying demonic run-ins. First day, they went to see these haunted tunnels. Second day, they have haunted house run-ins with headless samurai. And thirdly, they witness and help out with a full-blown exorcism. Yeah, talk about a busy week. It's like a Warren 3-in-1 package deal. Their first day consisted of visiting a set of condo buildings apparently riddled with a ghost infestation. Beheaded samurai soldiers haunt the hallways, a ghostly couple and the woman ghost of the gallows haunt the premises. The second night, they visited a haunted salt mine tunnel. Ed said it was the scariest place he had ever been to. The tunnel had buried some odd 200 people alive when an avalanche caved miners in. Ouch. The third night consisted of this. That's right, a very, very unsettling real exorcism. Okay, yeah, I'm not sleeping tonight at all. The Warrens sat in on 3 high priests of knowledge and spirituality known as disciples as they watched an apparent snake demon slither its way out of a person before their very eyes. And of course, this footage of a young woman speaking in not her first language, but tongues. Just moaning in agony. It's kind of hard to watch all that demonicness. Spooky level? 10 out of 10, 100%. And the number 1 spot, Maurice Theroux. And we come to Maurice. This one is terrifying on its own. It doesn't need a 3D movie follow-up. Maurice Theroux began to notice young. He was able to do things that no other man is capable of. Superhuman strength, knowledge of more than his academia showed. He was different. He worked around New England for years doing odd jobs and yet suffering through several relationships. After a physical examination and psychological test failed to bring any solution to the situation, the Warrens were finally called in. The Warrens were gaining popularity as a paranormal aid and had already worked on several cases. The activity ranged from low-level poltergeist activity to this aggressive physical demonic attack stuff. Apparently one night while trying to recite the Hail Mary to make the possession stop, Maurice became so violent he even tried to choke out his own wife. The Warrens made the decision that this was not a normal haunting but a possession and would need the help from Bishop Robert McKenna, who agreed to perform an exorcism. After examining Maurice, Bishop McKenna performed the ritual right away. Dude, that's terrifying. He's just staring off like a reptile. Apparently the demon identified itself simply as, quote, "I am what I am." And also, of course, invoking the kingdom, referring to demons from the legions of evil type stuff. The exorcism was successful, thank God. A young French-Canadian character appears in The Nun, and is supposedly loosely based on the real Maurice, who the Warrens actually think might have been possessed by the devil himself. What do you think? Number 5, The Conjuring. The Conjuring is a 2013 horror film directed by James Wan, written by Chad and Carrie Hayes. It is the first film in the Conjuring universe franchise and also based on real events surrounding the Perron family's demonic experiences. Ed was a World War II vet and a former police officer who became a self-professed demonologist. Lorraine, a self-claimed clairvoyant, making them the best demonic duo out there. In 1952, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research. They quickly gained notoriety as respected investigators after this case. The Perrons. In 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Rhode Island where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice odd things happening almost immediately. First, missing items, salt shaker, broom, then some ghostly sightings. Then, well, you'll see. It was discovered that the home had experienced some previous sinister owners, self-immolation, deadly accidents, and of course, murder in the attic. One violent and destructive spirit named Bathsheba. Quote, "Whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of this house, and she resented the competition of my mother posed for that position." Andrea Perron, the oldest daughter. Bathsheba Sherman, who lived on the Perrons' property circa 1800s, was rumored to have been a Satanist and involved in the murder of a neighbor. According to the oldest daughter, Andrea, there were numerous spirits that lived on the premises. The smell of rotten meat, beds levitating, and of course, the dirt-covered, abysmally cold basement. The Perrons asked the Warrens to come in more than 10 separate times on 10 separate occasions to help out their ghost problem. Lorraine conducted a seance to attempt to contact the spirits that were possessing them, to which during the seance, Carolyn Perron was possessed. The family swear that she was speaking in tongues and even rising from the ground, sitting in a chair. Andrea said, "My mother began to speak a language not of this world in a voice not of her own. Then her chair levitated and she was thrown across the room." Yeah, that's all the ingredients you need for an amazing horror movie universe to me. Terrifying. Number 4, Annabelle. The infamous Annabelle. We know her. The most haunted doll on Earth. First appearing in The Conjuring in 2013, then Annabelle Creation, then Annabelle Comes Home. I'm just waiting for part 4. Annabelle vs. Anderson Silva, UFC 279 live from Las Vegas. Yo, I'm straight up punting a haunted doll if it runs up on me, I'll tell you that for free. The film was inspired by the story of a doll named Annabelle, told by Ed and Lorraine Warren after obtaining and ridding its evil from its toy-like body. The doll is apparently responsible for 2 near-death experiences, 1 fatal accident, and a string of demonic activity. The doll's origins come from a gift to a young nurse named Donna from her mother for her 28th birthday. Donna brought it back to her apartment she shared with a roommate. Pretty normal Raggedy Ann doll. Then the two began to notice she'd move around on her own. They even started finding notes left around saying, "Help me," written on parchment paper, which they had no clue to even where to buy that or find that. Before long, they called in some help from a medium who insisted that the doll was harboring a spirit who had lived and perished on the grounds prior to their building being built. Medium called the priest called his father called Ed and Lorraine. So yeah, this thing is like haunted. You know when priests are like, oh god, no! Yeah, that's usually not a really good sign. Spirits do not possess inanimate objects like houses or toys. They possess people. An inhuman spirit can attach itself to a place or object, and this is what occurred in the Annabelle case. This spirit manipulated the doll and created the illusion of it being alive in order to get recognition. Truly, the spirit was not looking to stay attached to the doll, it was looking to possess a human host. Thank the gods, Ed and Lorraine locked her up in the occult museum where she lays to this day. Just waiting.
Number 3 on this list is Judith Penny. Ed and Lorraine Warren were married right up until Ed died back in 2006. The couple had been together for a long time and shared quite the life together. I mean, think about all the crazy things that they did. I highly doubt that many people can say that they stopped ghosts around the world and became famous together. While they were at the height of their success, they looked like a power couple. A real duo that you wouldn't want to trifle with. Ed and Lorraine Warren together taking on the world one ghost or possession at a time. Well, during all of that, although it looked like it was just the two of them, there was actually a third. Judith Penny has come forward and said in a sworn statement that she had a relationship with Ed Warren for 4 whole decades. 4 decades where they were having an intimate relationship that the world had no idea about. Apparently, Judith moved into the Warren household when she was 15 years old back in 1963. Ed, who was in his mid-30s at the time, would sleep with her regularly, and Lorraine Warren was well aware of the entire thing. I mean, she obviously was, considering Judith literally lived with the pair in their own house. In fact, before Ed's big career of being a demonologist took off, it said that he would drive Judith's bus to school. How freaking creepy and gross is that, guys? Literally her school bus driver, but also her lover while she's 15 years old. This relationship apparently went on until 2003, 3 years before Ed finally passed away. Obviously, the Warrens didn't want any of this getting out to anyone and kept it very hush-hush. She even had to have when she became pregnant with Ed's child, and that was kept under wraps. What we thought was this power duo was actually a sick and twisted trio that we knew nothing about. The Warren family, before Lorraine died, came out and said that they had no knowledge of the alleged conduct. Number 2 on this list is the Lady in White. The Lady in White was a ghost that was said to haunt the Union Cemetery in Connecticut. This was another one of the Warrens' most famous cases and gained a ton of notoriety. Well, sorry to burst your bubble, guys, but it's fake. Let's roll a clip of what is supposed to be evidence of the Lady in White. first off, where the hell is the ghost there, and how on earth did this qualify as proof? Like, frankly, I hardly see anything at all, but even if I did, guess who's behind it? Judith. Yeah, the girl that Ed had an illegal relationship with was the lady in white, literally dressed up in a sheet, and the pair took some grainy pictures and videos together and claimed it was evidence. Just another secret that the Warrens tried to hide, but eventually it's bubbled to the surface. And finally, number 1 on this list is the smoke and the mirrors. We've already talked about the Amityville horror house and the lady in white here, and about how they're all fake. Well, guess what, folks? I hate to do this to you, but they ain't the only ones. Everything the Warrens did was just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. The Smurl haunting saw other experts come in and look at the space. Nothing was wrong with it. Some of the exorcisms they performed, those people weren't really possessed by the devil, they were mentally ill people that the Warrens were preying on. The whole story about how they cured someone of being a werewolf, like, that doesn't even make any sense. Smoke and mirrors. That's what the Warrens' career was. Now, that's not to say that they didn't inadvertently stumble upon something paranormal every now and again. I mean, if you believe in that sort of stuff, then they must have, based on how active they were in the community. But basically, a lot of our favorite stories that rocketed them to the top of the demonology community are completely fraudulent. I guess it's not the worst thing in the world to know that we aren't living among as many ghosts as the pair claimed that we were.
Number 5 on this list is the dark magic doll. Yep, anything called the dark magic doll is probably something I don't want to know about. That's most likely why Ed and Lorraine locked this thing up in their museum, because it's really not something that should be out in the public world for anyone to have. We've all heard about voodoo dolls before and the potential powers that they can have. Dolls that are made through some sort of dark ritual with the power to then affect people on a real life basis. Usually these dolls are made with a singular person in mind, and the doll that's created can only ever affect that one person. The same principle applies to this magic doll. However, the thing with this one is that from my understanding, you don't need to make it with only one person in mind. Simply using the doll while picturing an individual should create the same effect as a voodoo doll. It's said to use this thing, you need to hang it from its neck, and then the person that you have in mind is gonna get sick and eventually die. Now, I'm not sure if you can use this doll more than once, or if it's just a one-off, but it's probably a good thing that the public doesn't know such information. Think about how dangerous this doll actually is, especially if it got into the hands of the wrong person. Somebody who wanted to inflict harm onto someone else could easily do so from the comfort of their own home, and nobody would be the wiser. To make this doll requires some pretty dark rituals and some sinister magic, but the Warrens were pretty secretive about the exact process of constructing this thing, and again, probably for the best. Having information like that out in the open on how to make such a deadly and dangerous doll just isn't safe for anybody. Right now, the only known doll is currently locked up in the Ed and Lorraine Warren Museum. Hopefully it stays there and we don't ever see any more of these creepy things popping up in the world again. Number 4 on this list is the Smurl haunting. So we've all heard about Amityville and we've heard about the Enfield poltergeist, but one haunting that didn't get talked about nearly as much was the Smurl haunting. Maybe it's because it was just a little bit too scary and the Warrens didn't want to release such information to the public. An article discussing the 7 best cases from Ed and Lorraine writes, in 1974, Jack and Jeanette Smurl moved into a house on Chase Street, West Pittston, Pennsylvania. Strange occurrences followed, leading the Smurls to believe that a demon possessed their home. They claimed the demon had slammed their German Shepherd into a wall, bit Jack's ear, and pushed one of their daughters down a flight of stairs. Both Jack and Janet were said to have been assaulted by the demon. In 1986, they contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren, who confirmed that their house was indeed haunted. Ed Warren would go on to say that he had witnessed a dark mass form inside the home and that the demon had left him a message telling him to get out. Now, one thing that I think gets glossed over a little bit in this article is the time that these people moved into their home compared to the time that Ed and Lorraine actually showed up. 1974 is when they entered this house, and Ed and Lorraine didn't get there until 1986. These people were living in a home that was severely haunted, so much so that they were getting assaulted by a demon, and they were living there for over 10 years. I think we think about haunting sometimes as being like a week-long scary event or something like that, but This was literally over a decade of living in absolute fear. Why this family didn't move is beyond me, but maybe they were scared this creature would just keep following them wherever they go. I think this is why this one doesn't get talked about as much. 6 months is one thing, but 10 years is totally different. Ed and Lorraine knew that and probably didn't want to scare the public into thinking that they could get haunted for potentially their entire lives.
Number 3. Annabelle. The most famous item in the Warrens' occult museum is of course Annabelle. She has featured in the Conjuring films as well as a few movies of her own, and has made people really think twice about buying any dolls secondhand. According to the Warrens, the doll, who in real life is a simple Raggedy Ann doll, not a creepy looking toy like in the movie that no child in their right mind would ever play with, was given to a nursing student in 1970 by her mother. The doll began exhibiting strange behavior, and the nurse and her roommate contacted a medium who said that the doll was being possessed by the spirit of a woman named Annabelle Higgins. The two took pity on the spirit and allowed it to stay in the doll. The doll began escalating its scary behavior. They threw the doll away, but it somehow appeared in their apartment again, leaving threatening notes. The two contacted the Warrens, who told them that Annabelle was really a demon. The Warrens took the doll away and made it the centerpiece of their museum. Of course, there is no documentation of any of this, and we have to just take the Warrens' word on it. However, skeptics eventually noticed that the story of the doll was very similar to an episode of The Twilight Zone that had aired 7 years before. In episode number 126, The Living Doll, a little girl is given a doll by her mother, Annabelle. The girl's stepfather doesn't like the doll, who, when wound up, begins talking to him, telling him that she doesn't like him. Thinking it is a manufacturer's defect, he throws the doll out, but the doll soon reappears and starts leaving him threatening messages until eventually tripping him on the stairs and killing him. The similarities are enough that many doubt the validity of the stories the Warrens have told about Annabelle. Is this an example of the Warrens stealing a story from TV? Or an example of life imitating art in a way that is both terrifying and disturbing, and that could never happen anywhere else but the Twilight Zone? Number 2. The Haunting in Connecticut. In the late 1980s, Carmen and Alan Snedeker and their 5 daughters and 2 nieces moved into a home in Southington, Connecticut, as their oldest son was suffering from Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they wanted to be closer to his doctors. The home that they rented turned out to be a former funeral home, which made the family a bit on edge, but they chose to stay regardless, as it was difficult to find an affordable home for such a large family. Things began getting strange, with objects disappearing, and the children reportedly seeing a man with long black hair around the house. The eldest son began exhibiting strange and violent behavior, and doctors diagnosed him with schizophrenia. His parents decided to consult Ed and Lorraine. They spent weeks in the house to get the full demonic experience and declared that the home was filled with great evil because the morticians who had worked in the home had been practicing necromancy. They performed an exorcism, and things more or less returned to normal. The story would eventually be adapted into the Haunting in Connecticut film, and the Warrens published a book detailing the case called In a Dark Place, which was written by them with the help of horror novelist Ray Garton, who was hired to interview the Snedekers and shape their testimony into a narrative. When the various family members' stories began to conflict with each other, Ray talked to Ed Warren about his concerns, and Ed responded by saying, "Oh, they're crazy. You've got some of the story. Just use what works, just make it up, and make it scary." Due to this, the entire case has become laced in controversy in the years since, with Garton distancing himself from his involvement with the supposedly non-fiction book. Number 1. The Happy Christian Family. The Warrens made a point of portraying themselves as a perfect, loving couple who supported each other while using their supposed gifts to help people who were in trouble and spread the message of God. This carries over into the Conjuring films that were inspired by their lives, with both critics and fans consistently bringing up their relationship as a highlight of the films, with it often being called one of the best love stories of the horror genre. But in real life, they were not quite the shining example of God's perfect couple that they would have you believe. Lorraine Warren had a very large role in shaping how her and her late husband were portrayed on film, with some very specific demands written into her contract. Frankly, a little too specific. Her contract with Warner Brothers explicitly states that neither Ed or Lorraine Warren could be depicted engaging in a physical relationship with in the Conjuring series. Furthermore, neither the husband or wife could be depicted as participating in an extramarital relationship. But why these extremely specific demands? Well, in 2017, a woman named Judith Penny came forward, saying that when she was 15 and Ed Warren was in his 30s, Ed began a physical relationship with her and moved her into his and Lorraine's home, with his wife's knowledge. When Judith became pregnant with Ed's baby, Lorraine, the supposed staunch Catholic, was the one who persuaded her to terminate the pregnancy to avoid a scandal that would ruin the Warrens' careers. As if that weren't bad enough, Judith claims that while living with the couple, they would argue constantly, with the fight often getting physically violent, with Ed routinely attacking Lorraine into unconsciousness. Not exactly the perfect couple that they claimed to be.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Smurl family haunting. Back in the 1980s, the Smurl family swore that their house was haunted. They would hear loud noises, smell foul odors, and hear pig grunts. Apparently, whatever was haunting their house also threw their dog to the wall and pushed one of their daughters down the stairs. Of course, Ed and Lorraine Warren came to investigate, and they claimed that this place was haunted. They even said that they saw a message appear on a mirror that read, "Get out." But get this, members of the clergy were brought in to do a blessing and an exorcism on the house. And guess what? They reported nothing unusual happened there. In fact, one of the priests had this to say about the Warrens, and I quote, "They weren't sincere, were not what they purported to be, and were given to sensationalizing." In the end, the church said that the family was just stressed over the health of their son who had brain surgery, and the foul odor that they smelt was because of a cracked sewer pipe right by their home. But the Warrens were adamant that the house was haunted, and then they turned the story into a book and made some money, so just saying. Coming in at number 4, we have the Amityville Horror. This probably is one of the most controversial paranormal cases of all times, because in the end, the whole thing was just one big sham. Here's a little rundown. On November 13th of 1974, Robert Butch DeFeo killed his parents and then his 2 brothers and 2 sisters. The house was then put up for sale and the Lutz family moved in. And apparently, the demon that got Butch to do that horrific deed started to attack this new family. Their doors and cupboards would swing open and close, green slime would ooze from their ceiling, and one time a demonic face with red glowing eyes was seen looking into the house, so on and so on. Now, how were the Warrens involved? Well, when paranormal investigators heard of what happened, they all contacted the family to go investigate the house for themselves. Of course, the Warrens were one of the individuals to contact them and set up a time to go check out the house for themselves. They spent the night at the house with others to see if it truly was haunted. In the end, they concluded that it was. Lorraine Warren claimed that she sensed great malevolence in the house and that there were multiple demonic entities there. But this was all BS because William Weber, Butch's lawyer, admitted that he made up this whole story along with George Lutz and a writer, Jay Anson. He said, and I quote, "They created the story over many bottles of wine. They admitted the house was never really haunted. They just made it all up." Which means so did the Warrens.
Number 3, The Haunting in Connecticut. The Haunting in Connecticut, although not officially part of the greater Conjuring cinematic universe and its several sequels, is nonetheless a very famous American haunting, detailing a poltergeist and, well, take a wild guess where. The story goes that the Snedeker family purchased a home near a hospital where their son was receiving treatment without knowing the home was formerly a funeral home, and were then exposed to all sorts of hauntings, strange sounds, possessions, the usual gamut of spooky stuff. The story was adapted into a film, The Haunting in Connecticut, which Lorraine Warren took great umbrage with, claiming that it was sensationalizing the real story and making it out to be something it's not. Which is very ironic. The Warrens themselves helped pen a book about the haunting called In a Dark Place. The book was written by the Warrens and co-authored by Ray Garton, a horror novelist who was brought in to help shape the story. However, after the experience, Garton spoke out about writing the book, saying that when he interviewed the family, multiple stories just wouldn't add up and they would all provide different accounts of what was happening. He brought this concern to Ed Warren, and Ed Warren told him, as Garton quotes, "Oh, they're crazy. You've got some of the story. Just use the parts that work and make the rest up. Just make the rest up and make it seem scary." Which is about as blatantly direct a confession as you could probably get from the Warrens. Since the passing of both Warrens, more and more more support has come out, suggesting the haunting of Connecticut was little more than a hoax to drum up some business. Number 2. The devil made me do it. Now, we've talked a little bit about the case of David Glatzel and his haunted rocking chair before on this channel, and earlier we'd mentioned Ed and Lorraine's involvement when we discussed it before. We focused primarily on the haunting. As a bit of a refresher if you forgot, the second son of the Glatzel family, David Glatzel, underwent horrifying experiences that the family believed to be supernatural in nature. Growling, speaking in tongues, and the parents going so far as to claim that he would levitate. The haunting would turn tragic when, after being exorcised by the Warrens, the demon's host to David's body made their way into the boyfriend of Glatzel's sister, Arne Johnson, who would get involved in a brutal altercation with his landlord, leading to the death of the landlord. In courts, the lawyer insisted that the actions were not his own and he was possessed by a demon. Unsurprisingly, it was thrown out and Johnson saw jail time. Interestingly though, the basis for the defense of "the devil made me do it," according to the lawyer, was all the idea of the Warrens. Now, in 2007, the brother of David Glatzel, Carl Glatzel, claimed in a legal filing that the book the Warrens wrote about the case was filled with complete lies, describing them as a pair of opportunists who blew a tragedy out of proportion and sensationalized his brother's mental illness and demonic possession for fame and personal gain. Most interestingly is that the priests named involved in this story all claimed that no exorcisms ever actually took place in the Glatzel home, and that David Glatzel began to improve because he was receiving counseling and sent to a private school, not divine intervention. Number 1. The Enfield haunting. The Enfield haunting was a famous paranormal investigation in London, England during the late 70s. The two daughters of the Hodgson family claimed that they were tormented and possessed by a poltergeist, causing them to speak in demonic voices, moving things around, and so forth. You know, the usual greatest hits of a poltergeist. The haunting story has come into some scrutiny as the years go by. For one thing, most of the haunting and most of the paranormal activity only ever seemed to occur around the young daughters, and not when anyone else was around. The youngest daughter of the Hodgson family has even later gone on to admit that she made up some of it. Now, the Enfield haunting served as the basis for the second Conjuring film, which centers the Warrens as brave heroes who step in to right wrongs and banish what other sinister otherworldly forces have invaded this once peaceful London home. Now, the film obviously has to embellish things just a little bit, as most Hollywood adaptations are wont to do, but in this case, they really stretch the truth. While the film showcases the Warrens as tireless do-gooders who stayed round the clock to tend to the Hodgsons and protect them from evil, in actuality, Ed and Lorraine Warren only visited the Enfield residence for a single day. They were uninvited, which is worth noting. Allegedly, one of the other paranormal investigators who was at the Enfield haunting, and I swear I looked this up, this is apparently his real name, Guy Playfair, that's a real name and not a Metal Gear Solid boss, okay, sure. Anyway, Mr. Guy last name says that upon meeting Ed Warren, he was told by Mr. Warren that we could make some real money off of this case. Leaving after a day, Ed Warren may have been right, since The Conjuring 2 grossed roughly $320 million, which is a really sweet sum to see residuals off of for attaching yourself to a story that you had nothing to do with. Lorraine Warren served as a consultant to all of the Conjuring films to ensure that the Warrens were portrayed realistically and correctly, so I just want to say it's a bit interesting that she didn't seem to have an issue with the film outright lying about their involvement in that case at all. But to quote Ed Warren, "You've got some of the story, so just make the rest up and make it scary." Number 5. The White Lady Ghost. Among the Warrens' career of demonology was this peculiar case involving a local Connecticut legend, the White Lady Ghost of Union Cemetery. Whoosh, that's a doozy of a title. Can't you just be a spooky ghost? Anyway, Union Cemetery dates back 400 years, and it's said to be haunted by this one notable ghost. The tricky thing is, though, nobody quite knows the exact origin of who she is. Some speculate that she's a woman who lost her child in childbirth and hasn't been able to move on to the afterlife because she still seeks out her child. Others speculate that she's a ghost of a victim who had been dumped into a sinkhole near the cemetery, and she's been unable to move on while this crime goes unsolved. You know, the fact that we don't even know her name or who she is, that's probably bothering her. That's probably contributing to all her worldly stress. The only things anyone can agree on truly is that those who say they've seen her claim that she's dressed in a bright white nightgown and has her head and face concealed with a white bonnet. One particularly good ghost story local legend says that in the late 90s, a firefighter firefighter responding to a call nearby said a woman in a white dress jumped in front of the truck and landed behind him. When he leapt out of the vehicle, there was no body on the ground, but a dent in the hood. Naturally, such a popular local ghost story caught the attention of Connecticut natives Ed and Lorraine Warren, and this never-before-seen footage was released by Tony Spera, their son-in-law, and it's Ed filming the cemetery looking for proof of the White Lady. We'll play some of it for you now so you can get your eyes on it and you can try to make out what's happening. Ed Warren claims that in the footage you can see the ghost walking behind him in the shadows and turning to look at him. Lorraine Warren once said this evidence was so important that it had to be locked away to be studied by the New England Society of Paranormal Research. And I don't want to pop anyone's balloon here. It looks to me like they locked it away because it's not really that impressive. I personally couldn't really see anything in this, but let me know down below if you think this is smoking proof of a ghost walking through the graveyard, or if it's just some blurry lights through the fog. And if you're looking for more ghost videos, stories about Ed and Lorraine, hauntings, possessions, exorcisms, and basically anything freaky, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some on top of it. Click through, subscribe, and like, and I am certain you'll find something to suit your fears. Stay scared. Number 4, the museum tour. If you want to go to the world's foremost collection of haunted relics and cursed objects, there's probably no room more affected by evil than the legendary collection of the Warrens' Haunted Museum of souvenirs from their case files. Now, sadly, as of this recording, the museum is currently closed down and hopefully reopening someday soon, but in the meantime, you can take a little digital tour. As this footage posted by the Warrens' son-in-law, Tony Spera, shows Ed Warren giving a guided tour of some of the more unique and memorable haunted artifacts resting in that Connecticut garage. Now, the full video is definitely worth a watch if you're a fan of the Warrens, since it's about as close as you'll be able to get to walk around the museum these days. It's a full half-hour long of Ed Warren walking around, going into grand detail and recounting some stories about their more notable cases. Some shoutouts I'll include real quick include the witch Hannah Cranna, an old Connecticut legend, or the Conjuring mirror, which might sound like it has something to do with the movie series, but actually refers to a bizarre case where someone used the mirror in a ritual to try and summon a demon and ended up inviting a poltergeist into his house. Ed talks briefly on some of their favorites, their cursed dolls and toys, such as a dinosaur from the Devil Made Me Do It case, and of course, no visit to the Warrens Museum could possibly exclude mention of Annabelle, who's basically the star attraction of the place and probably why anyone knows who the Warrens are and what keeps the lights on for so long. Annabelle is shown under a tight lock and key as Ed goes over her history of how they brought her in and first found her and how they eventually contained her. He touches briefly on her protocol, how she has to always be locked up in a storage box behind glass, surrounded by rosary beads and doused in holy water in an effort to keep the evil inside of her tucked away. And just a quick little small aside here from me. If a spirit is so powerful and so malevolent that it's able to possess a doll and contain unspeakable evil and attack humans, how is it thwarted so easily by a little bit of glass? I mean, I guess it's still a doll, it doesn't get demon strength, but I didn't know the solution for dealing with demons is the same way you deal with like a dog that's being kind of troublesome. You just put something around them until they can behave. Anyway, moving on.
Number 3, the cursed brick. Perhaps one of the least terrifying items on this list is a brick from the Borley rectory, aka a brick from one of the most haunted houses in all of England. The house was originally built back in 1862. It was a house built for the rector of Borley, but after a fire in 1939 it was never rebuilt. It was finally demolished after in 1944, but before its final days, Harry Price, a paranormal researcher at the time, reported numerous ghostly sightings, including a ghost nun, a ghost car passing by, as well as numerous horse and buggy sounds on the property. That's terrifying. Yep. A little piece of the haunted home sits in the Warren Occult Museum today, as they were able to visit the Borley rectory before it was demolished. According to local folklore, a nun fell in love with a monk from the monastery and the pair attempted to elope together. They were found and sentenced to death. The monk was reported to have been sent to the gallows in the monastery, whilst the nun was sealed into the walls of the nunnery alive. Ouch. This nun is believed to be the one that is seen on the grounds of the Borley rectory, endlessly looking for the monk that she once loved. That's kind of cute. That's kind of nice. The nun has been seen and heard many times over the years, and the first reports came from 1928 when the owner Guy Eric Smith and his wife contacted a newspaper to report a strange happenings. The newspaper took on the help of an investigator, Mr. Harry Price. Mr. Price stayed at the house to research for more than a year. While staying there, Price witnessed a ton of poltergeist phenomena. Even said that he got in touch with the spirit of a past tenant, Reverend Harry Bull, who died in the house. After numerous attempts at exorcising the property, in 1930, Mr. and Mrs. Smith left the house for good. The next residents of the house were Reverend Foister and his wife Mary Ann. They both experienced the same phenomena that Price and the Smiths had witnessed before them. However, this time the poltergeist activity seemed to be a little bit more aggressive, with reports of smashed glasses, broken windows, and Mary Ann being even thrown from her bed in the middle of the night. In 1939, the house was burnt to the ground due to an oil lamp. It was then left to ruins until 1944 when it was demolished. The Borley rectory was said to have been the most haunted building in all of the UK, so although just an unassuming brick, its origin story has seen quite a bit of life and death. Number 2. Black magic dolls. We already know some of the infamous museum dolls that are haunted by all hell, but we're not talking about Annabelle. There are apparently handfuls of other dolls that deserve some jarring honorable mentions. Tony Spera believes that there are dark powers that live amongst the various voodoo dolls and handmade figurines that are just casually splayed out for museum goers. Stuffed dolls like the Shadow Doll, of course, who looks like a night terror version of a twisted Muppets puppet. It's known for visiting dreamers and stopping their heart mid-nightmare with fear. Okay, that's a little excessive. So haunted, yeah. There's a satanic doll that looks like it would resemble a tall wooden man, possibly even the devil. Yeah, haunted beyond all hell. Found in the woods too, around satanic worship. Huh, could you believe? And of course, this dark magic doll. They just look haunted, you know? That off-colorization look, the facelessness, and glass casing around it. Again, that can't be a good sign. Historically, if you do this, obtaining a doll or statue or carving, add in a little dash of dark magic and voodoo, and voila, you have a very dark, cursed item. There's also a doll with no mouth and no eyes. Yeah, that's not scary at all. I think we can all agree that there's like 20 origin films like right here with each and every one of these black magic figurines. Like I understand Furbies a little bit more now, you know? Like that's a cursed item right there, 100%. Furbies belong in the Warren Museum. I'm surprised there isn't some there already. And coming at the number 1 spot, the music box. And of course we had to include one of the creepiest elements of the Conjuring movies, and I guess what makes any scary movie scary. It's the music. And boy is there one haunted creepy Warren Museum object that comes to mind: the Perron family music box. Director James Wan wanted to use the actual music box in the first film because mirrors and creepy music make for the best thrillers, but also because that there is a real haunted artifact from the real case. Today, the box is safely stored in the Warrens Museum alongside all of the other spooky items that we already covered. The music though, right? Like this part in the movie actually scared the shit out of me. Like the anticipation alone. They always do it so slow too, don't they? Dun 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 dun. But it's like real life though. That's horrifying. The music box apparently caused a lot of problems for these Perron girls, specifically April, the youngest of the Perron children. She found this antique in the house and she used to communicate to spirits. In the movie, this was a happy ending, but in real life, the Bathsheba Sherman curse was never really resolved. The original OG film, The Conjuring, was one of the best haunted house movies of the last decade that arguably spawned both a franchise and a new respect for old school horror. I wonder what's next for us in the James Wan universe, because that werewolf paw, yeah, that looks terrifying.
Number 5, the White Lady Ghost. Among the Warrens' storied career of demonology was a peculiar case involving a local Connecticut legend, the White Lady Ghost of Union Cemetery. Whoosh, that's a doozy of a title. Can you just shorten that down? Just like a Union Cemetery ghost? There you go, 3 words. Anyway, Union Cemetery dates back 400 years, and it's said to have been haunted by this one notable ghost in particular. Now, exactly where she came from, nobody's quite sure, you know? Nobody's got an exact date and time. Some speculate that she's a woman who lost a child in childbirth and hasn't been able to move on to the afterlife and still seeks out her child. Others speculate that she's a ghost of a victim who was dumped into a sinkhole near the cemetery and is unable to move on while the crime goes unpunished. The fact that we don't even know her name, I'm sure that's probably bothering her somewhat too. The only things anyone can agree on is that those who say they've seen her claim that she's dressed in a bright white nightgown and has her head and face concealed with a white bonnet. A particularly good ghost story says that in the late 90s, a firefighter responding to a call nearby to the cemetery said that a woman in a white dress jumped in front of the truck and landed behind him. When he leapt out of the vehicle, there was no body on the ground but a dent in the hood. So naturally, such a popular ghost would have to catch the attention of Connecticut locals Ed and Lorraine Warren, and this rare footage is Ed filming the cemetery looking for proof of the white lady. We'll play some of it for you now, and you can try and make out what's happening. It won't be the easiest. Ed Warren claims you can see the ghost walking behind in the shadows and turning to look at him. Now, Ed Warren said that this evidence was so important it had to be locked away to be studied by the New England Society of Paranormal Research, but not to burst anyone's bubbles, it kind of looks to me like they locked it away because it's not really that impressive. You let me know if you could see what they were trying to get me to see, because personally I just see some blurry lights in a dark graveyard. But maybe I'm not opening my third eye enough. If you're looking for more ghost videos, stories of the Warrens, hauntings, possessions, exorcisms, and a whole lot more, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. So click through, please subscribe, please ring that little bell so you don't miss a single one of our videos, but do that at the end of this video, okay? Because I got 4 more Ed and Lorraine Warren stories coming up for you right now. Number 4, Ed Warren invoking a spirit on camera. Coming up next is this video uploaded by Tony Spera, the Warrens' son-in-law, on his personal YouTube channel. If you're a fan of the Warrens and you're not already, I would recommend subscribing to Tony Spera. He puts all sorts of Warren related clips up on the channel and it's fun. Now, it's hard to say much about this particular video because it was uploaded without a whole lot of context. The video doesn't really mention a date, a location, or a case, or anything else like that. It's a bit troublesome because the Warrens have said to have worked on hundreds of cases over the years, so this could be any one of them, or maybe it's just one of the lesser, less exciting cases that got pushed to the side. They can't all get made into movies, Now, in the video, we can see Ed filming what looks like a fairly normal 70s living room, although the room is definitely haunted. You can tell right away from that liminal yellow wallpaper color. You can hear Ed Warren yelling out the name of Jesus Christ in an attempt to provoke the spirit into appearing. It's said that during an exorcism, to get a spirit or a demon or a ghost to reveal itself, you need to invoke the name of Jesus Christ, put a little fear of God into him. After about a minute of some serious invoking, it seems like Ed is finally getting through to the spirit because we see the table and chairs slide across the ground as if they're being pushed backwards by some incredible invisible force. Now, we don't really see anything more exciting or spiritual than the chairs and tables getting pushed, but that's pretty exciting nonetheless. There's not a ton of footage from the Warrens while they were, working the field, so it's pretty exciting to see whenever we get opportunities like this though. Of course, I do hear you saying this could just be faked. So is this the footage of a ghost caught on camera, or is this nothing more than a faked video to drum up some attention back in the day, like an original CGI hoax video on TikTok?
In third place, we have Catholicism as an undercurrent. This is probably the only thing that has always bugged me, and while it might be less of like a secret in the gotcha sense, allow me to explain. Hauntings Ed and Lorraine spoke about were caused by people who refused to conform to traditional family values. Only people who submitted to the patriarchy and the church could be safe in their eyes. Their 1980 book, The Demonologist, kind of explains it all. That Ouija boards would get you haunted, but so would reading books about witchcraft, owning an image of a non-Christian deity, or attending conscious raising groups. The horror in Amityville was supposedly aggravated when the unlucky homeowners engaged in the unholy pagan practice of, meditation. Addiction, depression, and disobedient children were all satanic. Hate, rage, despair, misery, drunkenness, and a sense of worthlessness will attract the demonic in a snap, according to Ed. One story in The Demonologist centers on a young woman who succumbed to evil after being fornicated with against her will. I do own this book, and I remember that not sitting super well with me. It was essential not just to stick with the status quo, but to be satisfied, with Ed going on record as saying, that a happy home is one's best defense, and even the most powerful exorcism will be effective only if you keep up an emotional atmosphere that does not attract such entities. And while I do believe this to an extent, not so far as Ed does. That atmosphere would involve going to church, by the way, saying that once a week was a good start. Yeah, I don't go to church. When you really think about it, the Warrens' entire basis of work kind of relied on victim blaming, evil that could, only happen to people who were already evil themselves. So personally, I don't agree with this whatsoever. Bad things do happen to good people, and not just because they don't follow Catholicism doesn't make someone evil. If you don't see what I'm seeing, allow another quote from Ed to help clarify things. People who do negative or patently unnatural things are essentially doing the devil's work for him and actually attract negative spirits to their side. Ed Warren was the homophobic brand of Catholic. Yes, I'm fully aware that not all Catholics observe this, and while most do not, Ed fell under that specific strain that sadly does. As a queer gal who didn't fully learn this until today, it kind of broke my heart that people who were so open to helping others and the unknown could be so close-minded. In second place, we have fraudulent items in the museum. So Ed and Lorraine were investigating numerous cases from the 1950s until they passed, right? And they founded like a whole society devoted to the research and investigation of the paranormal in 1952. Not to forget their entire museum attached to their home dedicated to objects from their cases. So explain to me how their website only has 10 public case files, and why so much from the museum looks like leftovers from a spirit Halloween. Doesn't anyone else find it pretty suspicious that we only get details from their really big news cases, while artifacts from other lesser cases are barely a footnote and have no story or witnesses attached? So in one corner of the Warrens Occult Museum is the skin of a tiger that is said to have killed 33 people in India while possessed by a demonic spirit. But yet, when I try to research this were-tiger, I find no account of any reportings in history about such a case, outside of, their quotes, or any offers from Ed and Lorraine to go into detail about any events leading to how it came into their possession. Seriously, take a look at some of this stuff. Given what I know about modern day Satanism, that idol looks like a papier-mâché alien mock-up. Well, most folks who practice Satanism don't actually pray to any sort of idol, or to the devil himself. But sure, for a moment I'll pretend like that's real and move on to the, black magic skull, which just looks like a cheap haunted house prop for a glow-in-the-dark room. Ditto for the, chilling masks. You know what, actually that's a lie. I've seen cosplayers make better masks. I'm not going to even try to rationalize the skull with horns or the recreation of the Witch of Monroe. Y'all don't need to see me fuming right now. In first place, their personal life. So if you watch the film franchise, you'd think Ed and Lorraine had a pretty ideal, wholesome, perfect Americana family style life. But the reality isn't so shiny or pure, despite what, they preach all the time. In the early 1960s, Ed Warren initiated a relationship with an underage woman with Lorraine's knowledge. Ed was in his mid-30s when he met Judith, who was exactly half his age. Yucky. Having not yet gained enough fame as a self-trained demonologist to pay the bills, Ed was working as a city bus driver in Monroe, Connecticut, while Judith was a student at Central High School in the nearby town of Bridgeport, who, conveniently rode his bus route. The two began an amorous relationship, according to a legal declaration from Judith in November of 2014. Heck, by 1963, she had moved into the Warrens' home, and for the next 40 years, she had a sexual relationship with Ed with Lorraine's knowledge. That same year, Judith was arrested after someone reported her relationship with Ed to local police, because, busybodies everywhere. And she spent a night in the North End prison in Bridgeport, while police tried to persuade her to sign a statement admitting to the affair. After she refused to cooperate, she was ordered by the court to report to a delinquent youth office for the next month. So, Ed, being the great guy he was, picked her up from school every week and drove her to the mandated meetings. Judith claimed that Ed told her many times that she was the love of his life. The Warrens explained her presence in the home as a niece or a poor girl who they had taken in out of charity and who helped them with office tasks. And she was mentioned in a lot of their books as being, their secretary, most notably in The Demonologist, which I've already quoted a couple times today. What do you know? I own a copy. In May of 1978, while in her 30s, Judith became pregnant with Ed's child, and Lorraine persuaded her to have an abortion because the birth of a child could become public and any scandal could ruin the Warrens' business. Now, if that wasn't awful enough, Judith has also claimed that Ed was, on occasion, physically offensive to Lorraine. Judith described one night in particular where she saw Ed slap Lorraine so hard she lost consciousness. Early on, she said, she witnessed him backhand his wife. Well, it might be easy to dismiss all these claims as, hooey, or someone trying to make something out of nothing. There's an interesting element from Lorraine that kind of proves this to be true. So when Lorraine signed on to consult on the Conjuring movies, she got a contract that states that the movies will not feature negative information about the Warrens, mentioning specifically intercourse with minors, youngling bad videos, anything to do with women of the night, or sexual violence. Kind of weird to have to spell that out if you don't have anything to worry about. Now, this is where I was wondering, well, where was the daughter in all this? Judy is still very much alive. What does she have to say about it? She spent most of her years living with her grandma and not her parents, claiming that it was because her parents were always traveling, so it was the easier and safer option. Her parents told her that they took Judith Penny in so she could have a place to stay and watch their house. But their daughter could have helped watch the house if she lived with them.
Coming in at number 5, we have Demonic Boy. You might have seen the photo of the Demonic Boy, but did you know that the photo was taken by Ed and Lorraine during the investigation into the Amityville horror? The photo is famous in its own right, with it showing a demon being caught on camera, meaning many did not know that it was from this case. The photo features what appears to be a young boy with white eyes who is peeking out of a doorway. Ed and Lorraine had set up an automatic camera that took infrared pictures to capture the second floor landing during the night. In the morning, when they checked through the pictures, they were shocked to see the little boy in the image. This remained a secret until 3 years later when it was shown to the public. But who could the boy be in this image? It is believed to be John DeFeo, the young boy who died in the home along with the rest of his family. Usually this would just be a guess, as you don't usually get a clear photo of a spirit, but if you compare the photo of the ghost boy to a photo of John DeFeo when he was alive, you can see that the spirit has the same features as the young boy. It appears to be bloody and possibly broken, but you can still tell that it is the same. The boy's hair also matches how it was when he was alive. It seems to prove that members of the family chose to stay within the home after they passed away. This could explain why the house is so haunted. Maybe they were trying to warn the Lutz's family not to stay there, or they might meet the same fate. Coming in at number 4, we have the DeFeo's furniture. When the Lutz family bought the house, it still had all of the furniture from the DeFeo's family inside. It all remained untouched since that horrible night. The Lutzes decided to keep all of the furniture so they could move in with it already to live in. The family even slept in the same beds that the DeFeos passed away in. Ed and Lorraine believed that the presence of the same furniture could be what caused the hauntings. The spirits were upset that there was a new family using their home. The spirits may have been attached to their beds where they had their last moments. This could even explain further into the demonic boy photograph. John DeFeo looked to be in pajamas peeking out from around his door. His spirit may have been resting in this bedroom when the camera awoke him and he went to investigate the noise when he was caught on camera. When hauntings occur, spirits often have attached themselves to an object, sometimes paintings, mirrors, or a creepy doll, so it seems likely that if you keep around the furniture of the family, then at least one member of the family will be attached to the house. This might have caused the Lutz's family to experience nightmares from sleeping in those beds and absorbing the spirit's fearful energy, as well as explaining the other horrors they experienced while living in the home. I don't think I could sleep there or keep any of the furniture if I knew what had happened.
Number 3, the Shadow Doll. And coming in at the number 3 spot for today is going to be this footage of the Shadow Doll. When you first enter the Warrens' haunted museum, be it digitally or physically, one of the first things you'll see is this frightening little doll, affectionately dubbed the Shadow Doll. The Shadow Doll, that's fun to say. It's made of bird feathers and real human teeth. Lovely, those are some of my favorite ingredients. Now, it's currently owned by Tony Spera. He offers a bit of insight into the doll's history, saying it was originally acquired at an antique shop where it was sold with the owners of the shop completely oblivious to the doll's cursed energy. I don't buy that at all. What do you mean oblivious to the doll's cursed energy? Somebody came to you and sold you a doll made of bird feathers and human teeth, and your first instinct wasn't to douse the thing in holy water and kerosene for good measure? I know pawn shops ain't exactly the classiest place around, but you gotta have some standards, right? You gotta be able to recognize evil. There are very few dolls with human teeth that aren't evil. Spera claims the doll has an insidious curse inside it. Oh, wait, no, sorry, the Warrens weren't insidious. Anyway, the curse says that if you take a photograph of the doll, and when it develops, you write a curse that you'd like to inflict and then send it to your victim. The person who then opens the envelope and sees the photo of the doll will invite the curse into your home. The doll is also capable of some dream magic like Freddy Krueger and can even stop your heart while you're asleep if Mr. Warren is to be believed. And I know what you might be thinking. Did you just curse all of us by showing us this footage and pictures of the doll? No, of course not. I toss a salt circle around the camera before I film anything just to make sure no residual curses pass through the internet. I will say though, I have heard some pretty credible rumors that you're more susceptible to be cursed if you don't like, comment, and subscribe after watching a video, so I honestly would say on the safe side of things, you should do that. And on another side note, having done a lot of research on the pair of these two, I cannot stress how many haunted dolls and toys these people had. They had like the world's scariest Toys R Us in their backyard. Number 2, Scotland City under the city. Now, the Warrens' investigations didn't just take them on cross-country road trips to the United States. The Warrens visited a ghost in almost every state they claim, and then some. The Warrens' quest saw them traveling all over the globe in an effort to uncover truth and combat evil wherever it was found. In this recently uncovered footage, we can see a unique perspective from Lorraine digging underground in the secret vaults beneath Edinburgh. Under the ground is a series of large, cavernous vaults that were once used as a storage space for merchants, but when abandoned became home to Edinburgh's poorest, who began to make it their dwellings. Probably a real nice space, you know, no daylight, musty air, thriving rodent population, but you know what? For the right price, I would probably go for it. It's probably better than most apartments in Toronto. Because of this, the vaults were the perfect place to conduct a little nefarious business that aren't quite fit to discuss on YouTube, but naughty stuff, just know that. It's believed that 2 of Edinburgh's most prolific criminals hid bodies here before taking them to medical schools to sell off. Having known this, with this context, it's absolutely no surprise that people believe the vaults to be haunted, and claim that they feel watched or touched when walking through them. So, if there's something weird going on, the Warrens follow. This one's actually pretty cool footage, I gotta admit. It's first person, making you feel like you're exploring the subterranean depths with her. She's being guided by an old Scotsman who seems to know the tunnels pretty well, and I gotta say, if I ever take a tour of an underground vault, this is exactly who I would like to be taking me, an old Scottish man. That's the most appropriate and trustworthy way to go ghost hunting. Now, they didn't find anything on this particular investigation, but while in there, Lorraine does claim that she can feel something communicating with her. Could it be spirits from long ago reaching out to Lorraine Warren, who claimed she had an extrasensory gift? Or maybe it was just kind of cold down there. And number 1, an exorcism. To some, the ultimate dream would be getting to ride up in the front seat with Warrens on one of their cases, getting to experience the paranormal firsthand under the tutelage of those who claim to have battled it their whole lives. It would be like if Obi-Wan Kenobi asked you if you want to go on an adventure with him. It'd be awesome. Well, hey, some people, they get to live their dreams every day. Like me, my dream was to stand in front of a camera and endlessly talk about ghosts and goblins, and it really is just the best. But a YouTuber by the name of Haley Reese got to live her dream when she met Tony Spera, the husband of Judy Warren, the daughter of the family, and Lorraine Warren, a bit before she passed away. She got blessed with a look into some never-before-seen footage of the pair of demonologists conducting fieldwork, namely an exorcism. Now, the person in the video has been blurred out to protect their safety, as, you know, it's one thing to be possessed by a demon, but doxing, whole other. We see Lorraine and Tony both fiercely conducting an exorcism, locked in spiritual warfare against a demonic force. We can hear Tony asking for the demon's name repeatedly, not because he's a friendly guy trying to make conversation, but because in order to properly drive a demon out of a host, you need to know its name. The name said, Beelzebub. Now, there is a little bit of a discrepancy whether or not Beelzebub and the devil are considered different entities, really depending on what book and depending on who you ask. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Either way, it's very bad news to have inside of you. Worst part is apparently that wasn't even the only demon inside there. It was like a clown car of demons inside one guy. Not enough room. Luckily, the pair was able to get all of the demons outside of them and banish them away. Does anyone wonder, does it leave like a weird taste in your mouth after you've had demonic possession? I feel like there's an aftertaste, you know? I definitely feel like I would need to brush my teeth afterwards, I think.
Number 5, Amityville. Believe it or not, there's actually 39 film adaptations made surrounding this case. Yeah, it's the OG case, the first crack at getting this terrifying formula down that we all love today. The Amityville Horror. Yes, the infamous haunting that took place on November 13th, 1974 at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. Well, in some versions, 108 Ocean Avenue. Places like that get really popular, you know? The Amityville Horror is a book by American author Jay Anson, published 1977, and it's also the basis of one of the scariest movies ever released from 1979 onwards. The paranormal experiences by the Lutz family has just led to great movies, you know? Spooky stories. It unfortunately has also led to controversy, lawsuits, name defacing, and of course murders and life sentences. But that was before all the media stuff. Hey, it was gruesome times. The LA Times said it was actually more hideously frightening than The Exorcist because it actually happened. DeFeo was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 life sentences. All of his parole appeals have been denied. For nearly 13 months after the murders, the house remained empty until it was bought by the Lutz family. And cue terrifying movie. When the Lutzes moved in, the furniture from the DeFeo family remained intact from the night of the murders. Yeah, they actually didn't know. They just thought it came furnished. That's a ripoff also, I'd be pissed. New couch smell? Nope, just ghost plasma. Yuck. The Warrens' most famous case was the Amityville haunting. This is where 6 members of the DeFeo family were found dead in their beds in 1974. A year later, the Lutzes moved in, and 28 days of this, basically. Also, let us know in the comments down below which Ed and Lorraine case scares the bejesus out of you the most. Like, which movie won't you watch, you know? I don't do dolls, dude. Annabelle gets me every time, I swear to God. Number 4, The Haunted. In 1991, the works of the late great Warrens was finally approached again after years of their demonic work had slowly and surely began to surface. They began fighting the good fight since the 40s, remember? With the success of the Amityville horror in the late 70s and the popularity it brought to the demonology topic within the US, the Warrens' name and reputation was finally appreciated, and they gifted us another gem of a story to film. This 2-hour, made-for-TV film based on the horrific events that took place within the Smurl home in the 80s. The Haunted, released by 20th Century Fox, earned itself 2 Golden Globe nominations. The case file of the Smurl's haunted house in Pennsylvania in the 1970s was infamous for not only demons, but a certain type of evil entity, the incubus and the succubus. This demonic pair usually haunts a sleeping person, and their possession is usually based around a more explicit manner of haunting. Yeah, Google it up, you'll get it. This film does a semi-tasteful 90s job at expressing what the Smurls were actually working with. Spoiler alert, it's pretty messed up. Demons almost quote-unquote breeding with those it possesses. The Smurls' version of their story was the subject of a 1986 paperback book titled The Haunted, of course, where this movie of the same name gets its inspiration from. The Warrens are introduced and explored for the first time in this film. Like many of the film adaptations, the Warrens are first seen performing college lectures into various hauntings. Lorraine is portrayed by Diane Baker. Ed is played by Stephen Markle. A pretty 90s feel to it, you know? Grainy, it's a little campy at times, but it's the first formula to this huge film franchise. Isn't it cool that Ed and Lorraine have been part of the modern horror scene for like 70 years? Their cases have been a part of the horror landscape way before Juan developed his Conjuring universe. Whether you believe in these cases or not, it's clear that they've made an impact.
Number 3, the Perron house. This maybe is the most famous of all the Warrens cases, and definitely one of the most recognizable, as it was the case that inspired the first of the Conjuring smash hit films, and I'll be honest, it's probably why you even know who the Warrens are. I'm certain if you're watching this video or you've been a long-time fan of the channel, you know the ins and the outs of the Perron family haunting probably better than I do, to be honest. But hey, we could all use a little refresher and a little touch-up sometimes. There's nothing wrong with review, so let's get right into it. In 1971, the Perron family moved their 5 daughters into a massive farmhouse in Rhode Island. I think the thing had like 14 bedrooms or something just absurd. It seemed perfect for Carolyn and Roger Perron. They had found their dream home. It was spacious, it was a nice neighborhood, there was room for their kids to play. It would have been a perfect forever home if it wasn't for the fact that malicious spirits had already decided to make it theirs. Shortly after the Perrons moved in, they noticed a series of inexplicable happenings. At first it was pretty benign, you know, some things go missing, objects move unexpectedly, you find a chair in a room you wouldn't expect it to, but then it ramped up rather quickly. The Perrons would claim every morning they would smell the smell of rotten flesh, and they would wake up to discover their beds levitating, and you know what, on some mornings I'd probably sleep right through that too. The family researched the house a little and discovered that it had been owned by a lineage of one family for 8 generations, with many members of the family dying under some pretty mysterious circumstances. They also learned that a woman named Bathsheba had lived there, a possible Satanist and witch, and they believed that she was haunting the home, threatened by Carolyn Perron's energy, seeing her as a threat to her. This is when the Warrens were called in to do a seance, to try and commune with the spirits beyond. One of the Perrons' daughters claims that they saw their mother speak in tongues, possessed by the spirits. Now, in the film, they went a bit Hollywood with it. The Warrens perform an exorcism and Ed Warren saves the day. But the real story wasn't so neatly wrapped up. The Warrens were actually kicked out of this house by Roger Perron, who said that they were just making things worse and they were making his wife's mental health worsen. The Perrons would end up remaining living in that home for the better part of a decade. And you know what? Honestly, if rent was good enough, and if I could get those malevolent spirits to offer to, I don't know, help out with the dishes every now and again, maybe kick in a few bucks for Hydra and the internet, I'd probably be okay with it too. Number 2, the Southland Werewolf. Now here is an interesting one for you. This is probably one of the oddest cases in the history of a pair of demonologists who made a career of exclusively investigating the most bizarre cases possible. It takes us back to England once more, this time in Essex. Now, unlike a majority of the Warrens' cases, this wasn't a haunted house or a poltergeist, but it was someone claiming that they had been cursed with lycanthropy. A fairly innocuous carpenter, one William Ramsay, had claimed that since boyhood he had been cursed to transform into a werewolf. I am so jealous. It hurts so bad seeing someone live out your dreams. I wanted to be a werewolf more than anybody, and I didn't get it. He claims that it had plagued him his entire life, his first transformation occurring during boyhood. He was playing outside when he felt an icy breeze come over his skin, freezing his sweat in place. He said he then felt this primal bloodlust and hunger come over him and was overwhelmed by a pungent foul odor. He flew into a fit of rage and found himself tearing up a fence post with the fence still attached and gnawing at the wire mesh. You know, just regular stuff that kooky old kids do. For years, he thought it was just a very bizarre chapter in his life, something that came over a boy no one could explain. But in 1983, Will was out with friends when he felt it come over him again. He felt that freezing cold chill on his skin and excused himself to the bathroom. It's here where he claims he saw the face of a wolf staring back at him in the mirror. He called a cab home and claims he started to growl and try to bite his fellow passenger. The driver stopped the car because, you know, I don't want a werewolf in my backseat either, and tried to get the raging man out of the back seat, and after minutes of thrashing, he finally calmed down. The years would keep going and William would do his level best to keep that inner beast in check. But it was in 1989, as his stories made the rounds of the tabloids, that caught the attention of Ed and Lorraine, who convinced William to travel to Connecticut to visit them for an exorcism. Initially, William was skeptical, which I find very surprising. You think that you're turning into a werewolf, but an exorcism makes you raise an eyebrow. Anyway, I digress. He ended up visiting, and reports claim that after a long night of violent thrashing, the wolf was exorcised from his soul. And since then, William Ramsay found peace. And number 1, the Smurl house. Bringing us back to a more classic haunting, the Smurl house is one of the more intense hauntings the Warrens took on. In 1974, Janet and Jack Smurl moved into a new house in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. They claim almost as soon as they moved in, they found themselves at odds with an invisible force that was terrorizing their family. They claim something was causing loud noises, horrible odors, and at one point, straight up launched their dog across the living room. Although maybe he might have found that fun. I don't know. I've met some dogs who were into stuff like that. The Smurls lived with this torment, I guess just assuming that dealing with a poltergeist was something every suburban family has to deal with in the 70s. It really seemed like it was a real problem back then. It wasn't until 1986, nearly ensuring a decade of haunting, that the Smurls thought it was time to call in some outside help, specifically from Ed and Lorraine Warren. When they arrived, Ed claimed the demon living inside the Smurls' home was very powerful, that it shook the mirrors and furniture when they arrived. Ed tried to scare it out by playing religious music and prayer. Sadly, this didn't quite work. I think you gotta try something a little heavier, maybe like Slayer, Megadeth. That might scare a demon, or they might find it awesome. Ed claims that he saw a dark mass forming in the home, something more powerful than he was expecting. He claims too he once saw a message appearing on one of the mirrors, warning the pair that they needed to leave. Months went by where the Warrens tried everything they could do to get rid of the demon, but nothing was taking. Eventually, it took in 1986 when a group of exorcists came to the house, and all took turns exorcising the house, and a priest even moved to the area, moved to the neighborhood just to keep an eye on things, make sure no demons were starting nothing.
Number 5 on this list is the relationship. As we'll look at a bit later in this video, Ed and Lorraine's relationship might not have been all it was cracked up to be. The couple that inspired The Conjuring have often been talked about as being one of the greatest married couples ever. In the movie The Conjuring, the pair very clearly have each other's back, and it's clear that there's a deep foundation of love between them. Or at least that's how the movie likes to show it. Real life may have been a lot different. Judith Penny was someone who would have had access to the Warrens' relationship and would have been able to see it behind closed doors. We'll get into why that is the case later and explain who Judith Penny is, but for now, just take my word for it. Apparently, she has come out and said that the Warrens' beautifully loving relationship that we saw on screen is all a bunch of baloney. In truth, Ed was extremely violent and toxic to Lorraine. This toxicity would manifest itself in many different forms. Oftentimes, it would come out in harsh, verbal abuse that felt as if it was coming right from thin air. totally unprovoked by Lorraine. However, occasionally this would manifest into physical abuse. Judith has come out and said that one particularly bad evening she saw Ed backhand Lorraine across the face with all his might, and apparently she lost consciousness. Now, Lorraine wouldn't just sit there and take the abuse either, she would fire her own shots as well. Judith thought that some evenings one of them wouldn't even be waking up the next morning based on how much they were fighting and how intense it would get. This has all the telltale signs of a horribly toxic relationship. The pair were just very good at hiding it. Number 4 on this list is the Amityville horror story. I feel like you've heard this story before, guys. Arguably the most famous of all the Ed and Lorraine Warren cases, this singular case launched the pair onto the main stage as being some of the biggest demonologists and paranormal investigators on the planet. Therefore, it was incredibly important to their image and their brand that this story was believed by the public. Fact of the matter is, though, they made the entire thing up. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was the spark behind this entire story. In 1974, Ronald gunned down his entire family in that home for seemingly no reason. He was later sentenced to life in prison for his crimes and died behind bars at age 69. These murders were brutal though and were heard nationwide. That's why when the next family to move in claimed the house was haunted, it actually got a ton of attention. The family said that slime would appear all over the place with no apparent origin. Things would swing open and objects would fly around the room. The house itself could simply not warm up and would stay incredibly cold for weeks on end. The media got wind of this, and so did Ed and Lorraine. They went into this place and went on to have their most successful case ever, ultimately concluding that the house is in fact haunted. However, this just simply was never true. The family's lawyer later came out and said that they collectively made up this story together and thought it would get a lot of traction over a few bottles of wine. The Warrens' initial success literally started by a few drunk people deciding they were going to pull a trick on everyone. Even though this news came out, the Warrens have always held strong onto the fact that the house was in fact haunted.
Number 3. The Haunting in Connecticut. The Haunting in Connecticut is the first of the Warren universe of horror and is based on all real cases and points. A 2009 gem, it accounts the horrific paranormal case of the Snedekers, who moved into a ghost-infested house in Southington, Connecticut. Carmen and Alan Snedeker, their 3 sons, their daughter, and 2 nieces, all unwillingly now pray for the other side. The eldest Snedeker son unfortunately was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the family moved to Connecticut to be closer to the doctors. What they weren't initially aware of was that the home they were renting was once a funeral parlor. Yeah, tools and bloody furniture just lay as they once did, untouched. Mom notices items going missing. That's just the start. The children start to see strange people in their home at night, specifically a man with long black hair. Their son's drastic personality change, which included violent outbursts and attacks on his family, was then diagnosed with schizophrenia. No one was convinced though. It was agreed that maybe he was becoming a victim to the house's grim history after all. After weeks in the home to get the full demonic experience, the Warrens came to the conclusion that the morticians that worked on the home previously had practiced some abysmally sinister acts on the lifeless bodies, deepening the home in a twisted, dark origin. After Ed and Lorraine were called in to clean it up, an exorcism or two, and the house finally became a home again. The case can be reimagined in 2009's Haunting in Connecticut, where the story follows the truth the Snedekers experienced all those years ago. It's pretty scary, yeah. Number 2, The Nun. The 2018 spin-off film and prequel to The Conjuring 2. A demon nun channeling an evil spirit named Valak. The Nun serves as an origin story of sorts within the Warren universe. Sister Irene and priest Father Burke travel to investigate a monastery in 1952 Romania after the Vatican learns of an accident and summons the father to investigate. According to the Lesser Key of Solomon from the 17th century, Valak is the Grand President of Hell. Valak's look in both films were inspired by an experience Lorraine had shortly after investigating the Amityville horror house in 1976. Lorraine was at home in her bed reading when she felt a presence. She saw a black whirlwind of dark mass enter the room. It was like a vortex. Lorraine prayed to be released from the forces of evil. She told it, "Leave and go back where you came from," over and over again. It vanished, but she never forgot. And cue scary movie. Yeah, apparently while investigating the once very haunted Borley rectory, the most haunted spot in the UK, Lorraine had a run-in with a sinister nun. They ended up coming face to face with the churchyard's ghost, who was, according to lore, a nun buried alive behind the brick walls of the convent centuries ago after having an affair. Apparently Ed took photos on his camera of the Borley rectory ghosts as they encountered them. Quote, "It was pitch black and there were no lit candles or lights. Photographers snapped photos on a 35mm camera with infrared film. When they developed the images, what appeared to be a spectral nun was seen walking down the aisle praying." And number 1. Part 2. The Conjuring. The devil made me do it. Sounds like a lame Satanist excuse, doesn't it? Actually, now a term of phrase pleaded before a court of law. Yeah, who knew? Could possession under demonic circumstances prove innocence over acts performed while under? This is the 8th installment of the Conjuring universe. The plot is as follows. It's 1981. Ed and Lorraine documented the exorcism of 8-year-old David Glatzel, attended by his family, his sister Debbie, her boyfriend Arn Johnson, and Father Gordon of Connecticut. During the exorcism, Arn invites the demon to enter his body instead of remaining in the boy's. The family, including the Warrens, witnessed the demon transport itself from David's body to Arn's body while he suffers from a heart attack and is taken to the hospital unconscious. Arn and Debbie return home, but Arn is left feeling a little unwell and eventually ends up murdering his landlord, stabbing him 22 times due to this demonic possession. Yeah, sounds pretty terrifying, doesn't it? His case becomes the first American murder trial to claim demonic possession as a defense. Well, sorry to break it to you, but this is literally a play-by-play of the events that actually happened. Yeah, maybe not shot for shot, movie style, but the script and skeleton was there for sure. Arn was subsequently convicted after a messy murder trial, though he served only 5 years of a 10 to 20 year sentence. The case was huge. It attracted huge media attention and in fact was the first in history of the US claiming the paranormal as a defense. The couple went on to marry each other, and tell their story as the Warren side as well. Books, documentaries, and eventually this huge film universe.
Number 5. Union Cemetery. In Weston, Connecticut, there is a cemetery that many paranormal investigators and enthusiasts claim is one of the most haunted locations in the entire state. As legend goes, many years ago, a man was driving down the road when a woman suddenly appeared in the middle of the road. The driver didn't have time to stop or slow down and struck the woman, but when he pulled over to try and help the woman, she was nowhere to be seen. Since then, several people have reported seeing the woman in white wandering around the cemetery grounds. Some believe she is a woman who lost her son and is still searching for him, while others believe she may have been a jilted bride who took her own life. Either way, it is a local legend that draws a lot of visitors to the town. Oddly enough, this cemetery is just down the road from the home of Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they claimed to have spent a large amount of time trying to find evidence of the White Lady. In 1990, Ed claimed that while he was staying overnight in the cemetery, he saw the bride. As he described it, "I heard a woman weeping, and I looked out and saw hundreds of ghost lights floating around and forming into the figure of a woman. I couldn't make out facial features." He claimed that he did manage to capture this encounter on video, however. This is of course very exciting, as definitive proof of paranormal activity is rare and could completely change the way people view their own mortality. When asked to show the footage that would validate his claims, Ed said, "No. This is the incident that is least clearly a lie out of all of them on this list, but it is typical behavior from the Warrens, who claimed that they had proof that they then simply refused to show to anyone all the way up until their deaths." Oddly enough, the ghosts of the Warrens sometimes pass through the dark dimension and visit me. I even have a recording of it on my phone that proves I'm telling the truth. You can't see it though. You'll just have to take my word for it. Number 4. The Amityville Case. Perhaps the most infamous case the Warrens ever came into contact with. George and Kathy Lutz moved into a house and claimed to experience paranormal activity. A year prior, the house had been the site of a horrible crime, with 23-year-old Ronnie DeFeo going from room to room and shooting his 6 family members in cold blood. At his trial, he claimed that voices he had heard on the night of the crime had told him to do it and had controlled his body. But this was not believed, and he was sentenced to 6 life sentences. The Lutz family moved in and reportedly would experience phenomena like unexplained gelatinous drops appearing on their carpet, witnessing each other suddenly appearing to have aged 90 years, doors slamming by themselves, levitating, and waking up every night at 3:15 a.m., the time the murders took place. The family fled soon after and invited reporters and psychic researchers to study the house. The Warrens, of course, showed up, with Lorraine claiming the house was possessed by demons and using the opportunity to get her and Ed on TV, cementing their reputations as paranormal experts, despite not showing any evidence of their findings. The Lutzes published a book about their experiences that was made into a successful movie series called The Amityville Horror, but years later, they would admit that much of the book was highly exaggerated, with much of the content being the result of a creative brainstorming session and 4 bottles of wine. So, much of the activity that the Warrens were validating with their investigation never occurred. But what about the killer saying he had been controlled and forced to shoot his family? Well, years later he admitted that had just been a lie, designed to get him off with an insanity plea. The majority of the lying in this case was by people other than the Warrens, so maybe they were just taken along for the ride. But there are still plenty of examples of them being suspicious to downright hucksters.
Number 3 on this list is the African fertility dolls. Tony Spera goes into detail about these dolls on the official Ed and Lorraine YouTube channel, and the story is pretty creepy. Apparently these dolls, which are now in their possession, were originally from Africa. They were made by an African witch doctor, but were then stolen from him and brought back to America. They were sent to a police officer who was in on the theft and thought that he could get some serious value for some authentic African fertility dolls. What he didn't expect was for these dolls to take his life. After he acquired these dolls, he soon became paralyzed from the neck down and, after some time, succumbed to this disease and died. These dolls are cursed, and after stealing them from their respective owner, took the life of those who were responsible. Now they're in the museum, and Tony warns us on the YouTube channel about ever touching them, for a similar fate could happen to us. It's stuff like this that really flew under the radar during Ed and Lorraine Warren's time. But the fact that these dolls exist, and there are probably many more of them in the world, is truly very terrifying. Number 2 on this list is the Southend Werewolf. Born and bred in the Essex seaside town of Southend, the first inkling of trouble came when William Ramsay was just 9 years old. Like any normal child, he was outside in his back garden when he began to feel strange. It was deep into one Saturday afternoon in 1952 when an icy blast of frigid cold swept over him. Perspiration froze on his skin and a foul stench came close to making him vomit. The bewildered youngster only had 2 things on his mind: running away to a life on the ocean wave and wolves. By this time he was close to the garden fence, and only the calls of his mother brought him out of whatever had gripped him. However, something else took complete control of him instead. Intense and pure rage had installed itself firmly within his psyche. Using this and the adrenaline-fueled strength he now possessed, he had uprooted a fence post with the fence still attached to it and was swinging it like a club. Not even his parents could easily remove the post with their bare hands. That was a passage written by Les Hewitt talking about the beginning of the Southend Werewolf case. This incident was the beginning of a long road for Bill. For 15 years, though, he didn't have another episode until he started having dreams. Dreams that his wife would look at him and run off in fear after seeing him. These eventually ceased, but then 15 more years later at a party, it all came out. Apparently on the drive back home from this party, Bill lost it. He turned into a complete animal and the wolf came out. Scratching and biting at the driver, Bill had completely turned into a werewolf. His body changed too. His shoulders hunched, his nails grew to claws, his humanity had completely left him. The Warrens were then brought in to help him and had to perform several exorcisms to get rid of this werewolf presence. Think about this entire story though. Bill, to my knowledge, hadn't been bitten by a werewolf or had any extended exposure to one. He just became one. How scary is that? At any given point, I could just slowly start to develop werewolf-like characteristics and turn into a rabid super beast. I think that's why this case didn't get as much media coverage as some of the other ones. Just the fact that something like this could happen, and I mean, that could really scare the public. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Shadow Doll. So we already talked about some other dolls, but this takes it to a whole nother level. You know the horror movie franchise Chucky? Where the doll is possessed with a serial killer and it's out to get people, like that whole bit? Well, this doll makes Chucky look like the sort of thing you invite to your kid's birthday party. Yeah, it's pretty freaking bad. The Shadow Doll, for one, looks absolutely terrifying. It looks like this woman with a white face totally covered in black robes with chains and spikes sticking out of her. It's apparently made of bones and even has a human tooth in it. Now, even though this doll doesn't operate like Chucky and move around in the real world, it does something even more terrifying. Anytime you go to sleep, you aren't safe if the shadow doll has you in its sights. It's said that this grotesque looking creature will come to you while you're sleeping in your dreams and terrorize you. It isn't said to be a quick kill either, like this thing's pretty sadistic in how it haunts you. It will keep coming back over and over and over again until finally it terrorizes you to a point where your heart literally stops out of fear and you never wake up. Think about how horrible that would be. To be absolutely terrified of going to sleep because you know that the second you close your eyes, this shadow doll could be upon you and it might be your last night ever. Similar to the other dolls that we talked about, this thing is locked up in the museum, but I personally don't think that's enough. I know that the Warrens like to show this stuff off, but honestly, screw it. This thing is far too dangerous, burn it with some fire, and let's be done with it.
Starting off at number 5, Annabelle. Now, if you know anything about the Warrens, then you probably have heard about Annabelle, one of their most famous cases and widely recognized relics in their haunted museum. Annabelle's story served as the cold open for the first Conjuring movie, and then she blew up into stardom when she got 3 movies of her own, starting with the spin-off, appropriately titled Annabelle. The story of the haunted Raggedy Ann doll made host to a demonic presence that attacked its owners is a classic horror story, and the films and the Warrens both insist it's based off real events. Well, to a degree. You might have known that Annabelle the movie was based on a true story. A story of a haunted doll, a lifelike creation of plastic and springs and a painted smile. But what if that doll was little more than a creation of the Twilight Zone? The Twilight Zone episode Living Doll details a family that is haunted by a possessed doll brought home by a mother for her daughter. The doll, Talking Tina, tortures a family who brought home the seemingly innocent plaything. Now, a TV show episode about a haunted doll could easily be chalked up to coincidence, although where it gets interesting is that the woman from the episode who purchases the haunted doll is named Annabelle, which seems a little too on the nose to be coincidence. The episode first aired in 1963, a full 7 years before the Warrens first investigated Annabelle, giving them plenty of time to catch reruns of The Twilight Zone. In the Warrens' own haunted museum, there are stories claiming that the last owner of Annabelle before the Warrens suffered a cruel early fate. However, no name or evidence is given to this owner, seeming a lot more like a ghost story to seem scary than any actual evidence. In fact, like a lot of stories involving the Warrens cases, it's very difficult to find any information or sources that comes from somewhere that isn't Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, there's no outright proof that they did lift the story from the Twilight Zone, but you have to admit it's something to think about. Now, whether or not the Warrens were the real deal is one thing, but I can tell you that Top 5 Scary is the real deal when it comes to the best scary videos out there. So why don't you toss a little subscribe our way? Number 4, the Amityville Horror. The Amityville Horror haunting is one of the most famous paranormal myths in Americana. You could argue it's the most famous of the Warrens cases, being made into a series of several so-so movies and one good one. The story goes that a nice family moves into a home without knowing that the previous occupant had slayed his family and heard voices plotting against him. The new family, the Lutzes, begin experiencing all kinds of paranormal and demonic troubles plaguing their new home. Hearing word of this, the Warrens independently sought out the house and the case, bringing along a film crew with them to document their findings, including one rather famous photo of a boy descending down some stairs, which the Warrens insist was a ghost. Now, the story of the Amityville Horror is a hotly debated one for years as to whether or not it's a true haunting or just a hoax. The unfortunate incident involving the first family is real, but the rest is up for interpretation. There's a lot of evidence, both big and small, to suggest that the story was adjusted to sell books. The lawyer for the assailant that started this whole haunting claims that he made the story up with the Lutzes over many bottle of wines, quote, to drum up controversy in hopes of getting his client a retrial. The Warrens, independently involved, seem like this is what they were after as well. It's possible too the Amityville Horror itself could have just been inspired by the film The Exorcist, coming out a few years earlier when demonic possession would have been very popular and on people's minds.
Coming in at number 3, we have the Enfield haunting. This is the case that was featured in The Conjuring 2. The case involved a young girl named Janet Hodgson, who was said to have been possessed by a spirit. The spirit would throw objects across the room, make noises in their house, and sometimes would levitate Janet into mid-air. Ed and Lorraine Warren were assigned to this case and to expel the evil entity responsible for all this. But turns out that Janet and her sister Peggy made this whole thing up. In 2015, when Janet was 45 years old, She said that her and her sister faked some of the paranormal activity. So according to researchers, most of the paranormal things happened when no one was actually looking at the two girls. Like they would have their backs turned to them and then all of a sudden an object would be thrown across the room. Well, obviously the girls were just doing that themselves. They also said they captured audio of a dresser falling over on its own. But upon closer inspection, footsteps could be heard leading up to the dresser before it fell over, meaning someone likely just pushed it over. And the photos of Janet apparently levitating in midair look more like she just jumped off her bed. Janet also confirmed that this was the case. So the whole Janet being haunted by a ghost? Yeah, it was made up, and the Warrens went along with it. Also, according to other sources, the Warrens' involvement in this case was very little. Apparently, they just showed up one day uninvited and only stayed one day and then left. They didn't really help the family. It seemed more like they wanted to just gather information on this case to then talk about it publicly and, receive fame and fortune. In our second spot, we have the Snedeker family haunting. This is the family haunting that the Haunting in Connecticut movie and book was based off of. Story goes that Alan and Carmen Snedeker moved into a home with their daughter and 3 sons. While exploring their home, they found weird stuff in their basement, like tools morticians would use. That's when they found out that their home used to be a funeral home. And that's when the haunting started. Their eldest son started getting terrifying visions and started seeing ghosts. And also apparently one day as Carmen was mopping the kitchen floor, the water just turned into blood and then smelled of decaying flesh. So on and so on, you get it. In 1986, the Warrens investigated the home and claimed it was indeed infested with demons. But here's the thing. A man named Ray Garton was hired by the Warrens to write a book about the haunting. Later, he revealed that the Snedeker family apparently had serious problems with drugs and alcoholism. When he interviewed the family, they couldn't keep their story straight. And they all had different accounts for what happened. So he went to Ed and told him this problem, and Ed said, and I quote, "You've got some of the story. Just use what works and make the rest up. Just make it up and make it scary." So the writer literally made up like 90% of the story on his own. On top of that, the neighbor living in the upstairs apartment in this haunted home claimed nothing paranormal ever happened to them. And on top of that, no one who has lived in this home after the Snedeker family has had any paranormal experiences. So it looks like the haunting was just made up by this family, and then the Warrens went along with it for the money and the book deal. And in our number 1 spot, we have The Devil Made Me Do It. This is the case that was featured in the film The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. It revolves around a man named Arn Cheyenne Johnson, who in 1981 fatally stabbed his landlord Alan Bono to death. But he claimed that he was totally unaware what he was doing and that the devil made him do it. In fact, his case was the first court case where the defense was arguing demonic possession. And of course, Ed and Lorraine Warren were involved in this case. In fact, they might have made up this whole story for him to get away with murder. Let me explain. It's wild. So according to the story, Arn's brother-in-law, David Glatzel, was the first one to be possessed by this demon. He claimed a man with big black eyes and a thin face with animal features was controlling him. In reality, David was never possessed. He was mentally ill and needed professional help. According to David's brother Carl, he claimed that his whole family was manipulated by the Warrens. He claimed that the Warrens promised his family that they would become millionaires if they insisted that David was haunted by demons. In the end, he actually sued the Warrens for trying to exploit his brother's mental illness and for attempting to get a guilty man to walk. Now, where does Johnson come into play? Well, he claims that he got the demon out of David by telling it to take him instead. And that's how he supposedly became possessed. But like I said, this whole thing was orchestrated by the Warrens as a get-rich scheme.